evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the Kalamazoo City Commission to order for Monday, May 20th, 2019. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Anderson.
Here.
Commissioner Cooney.
Present.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Here.
Commissioner Sykes.
Here.
Commissioner Urban.
Here.
Vice Mayor Knott.
Here.
Mayor Hopewell.
Present. For our opening ceremony, we will have an invocation by Pastor Sarah Schmidt-Lee, First Congregational Church. I ask that you stand for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Good evening, Pastor.
Good evening. For the invocation tonight, I'll be reading the lyrics from a song called The Lost Words Blessing, inspired by a book by Robert McFarlane. Enter the wild with care, my love, and speak the things you see. Let new names take and root and thrive and grow. And even as you travel far from heather, crag, and river, may you, like the little fisher, set the stream alight with glitter. May you enter now as otter, without falter, into water. Look to the sky with care, my love, and speak the things you see. Let new names take and root and thrive and grow. And even as you journey on past dying stars exploding, like the gilded one in flight, leave your little gifts of light. And in the dead of night, my darling, find the gleaming eye of starling. Like the little aviator, sing your heart to all dark matter. Walk through the world with care, my love, and sing the things you see. Let new names take and root and thrive and grow. And even as you stumble through the mocker sands eroding, let the fern unfurl your grieving. Let the heron still your breathing. Let the selkie swim you deeper, oh my little silver seeker. Even as the hour grows bleaker, be the singer and the speaker. And in city and in forest, let the larks become your chorus. And when every hope is gone, let the raven call you home. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Commissioners, we are on item B3. I am in receipt of a letter of resignation by Commissioner Sykes, and we have a resolution accepting that resignation. The resolution reads, whereas City Commissioner Shannon Sykes Nugent, I said that wrong, sorry, has established residency outside of the corporate limits of the City of Kalamazoo, and having submitted a letter of resignation from the City Commission effective May 20th, 2019, now therefore it is resolved that the resignation of Commissioner Shannon Sykes Nugent is accepted by the City Commission with heartfelt thanks for her service to the city and the citizens of Kalamazoo. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Cooney.
Support.
Supported by Commissioner Anderson. Is there discussion? You will also have opportunities when we give the proclamation as well. So it's your option. I have to ask you. Hearing none, Clerk Borling, please call the roll.
Commissioner Cooney.
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Knott. Yes. Mayor Hopewell.
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner's motion accepted. We are going to honor our commissioner, and if she'll step to the podium with me, we have a proclamation and certainly commissioner's comments. And for the audience, we will allow comments as well after commissioners have made their comments. Commissioner? Commissioner Cooney.
So it is my honor to read this proclamation. Whereas Shannon Sykes Nearing has served the city of Kalamazoo as a city commissioner for 3.5 years, from 2015 to 2019. And whereas Commissioner Sykes Nearing has served as a liaison to or member of the Employees Retirement System Board of Trustees, the Community Development Act Advisory Committee, and the Shared Prosperity Kalamazoo Youth Work Team. And whereas Commissioner Sykes Nearing has infused her work as a city commissioner with a passion for activism and community engagement and social justice. And whereas Commissioner Sykes Nearing has made an impact in the areas of gentrification, homelessness, affordable housing, climate change, youth programs, racism and white supremacy and police-community relations. And whereas Commissioner Sykes Nearing's work on behalf of Kalamazoo is highly commendable and leaves an indelible mark on all its citizens. Now, therefore, on behalf of the 52nd City Commission and Bobby J. Hopewell, Mayor of the city, we hereby honor, recognize, and thank Shannon Sykes Nearing for her dedicated service on the City Commission and wish her well in the next phase of her journey.
So I wasn't supposed to cry tonight, y'all. It's not my expectation. I did not prepare anything to say tonight. I think, my really long-winded letter, open letter about my resignation sort of covers it. But I just would like to reiterate what a pleasure it has been, to work with all of you. I know some might not believe that, but I am a strong believer that we can hold each other accountable and have tough conversations and still respect each other, and still be friends and still be ready to move forward and do the work together. And so it really has been an honor and a pleasure. It's been an honor to serve this community. I want to thank the community for allowing me to serve and also allowing me to grow with you all. And to learn even better than when I started about what it is our community needs and thrives on. I've learned a lot in my time here, and I'm not going anywhere. So I'm still going to be out loud and outspoken and doing work in this community and sometimes driving this guy crazy and a lot of folks up here. It's not going to be that easy to get rid of me, but I just won't be doing it up from that seat. So thank you again. I appreciate the opportunity, and I wish everybody well as you continue to do the important work of moving the city forward. So thank you.
Comments from commissioners? Commissioner Anderson.
Well, my remarks include a presentation as well, and I will keep it brief, but I can say it has not been boring. And I appreciate the conversations we've had and as intensive they've been at times. So I appreciate that very much. I'm glad that through all that, we can still be friends. So based on that, I have a special presentation from one former chicken farmer to possibly a future chicken farmer. And so that said, here is my special presentation. It is proven techniques for keeping healthy chickens that I picked up. There's a receipt in here if you want to return it, but I picked it up from one of my favorite stores in Kalamazoo. Well, it's not actually in the city of Kalamazoo, so let's not go there, but close to Kalamazoo, I'm sorry, Tractor Supply. So I have this book for you and a little gift certificate for Tractor Supply. Want to come up? Here it is with a nice chicken picture on the front.
Oh my goodness, thank you. We just brought home 9 chickens yesterday, so it's perfect timing.
Perfect timing, perfect timing.
Mr. Cooney.
Yes, Shannon, when I think of you, I think what President Roosevelt said one time, the measure of our success is not whether we do more for those who have in abundance, or whether we do enough for those who have too little. Because that has been your guiding star all that your time that you were up here, and I thank you so much for that.
Shannon, I admire the fact that you walk the walk. There's never a doubt in my mind when you take on an issue that you're going to see it through the finish line. And you don't surprise me with the issues that you take on. I mean, this potential farm, right? When I heard about it, I thought, yeah, of course Shannon's going to do this, and she's going to do it with excellence. So good luck. It's been a pleasure serving. And if you remember when we both ran in 2015, they said it was going to be you or me, but not both of us. And we did it together. And it's because we need more women in leadership positions. I look forward to seeing how you continue to lift up women, particularly women of color, so that they are afforded the same opportunities that you and I have both had. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Mr. Cooney.
Well, we go back like 2 flats on a Cadillac. And, you know, it's an honor. It's an honor to serve. We have good conversations. We've had bad conversations. We had everything in between. And so it's been an honor. Your legacy is one that, you know, that a lot of individuals will aspire to achieve. And I think that can't be said lightly. So thank you for your service. What people don't realize, and I'm glad that our Honorable Mayor asked for your youth or your children to be up here with you, is because when you serve in these seats or you serve in different capacities, you don't understand the stress or the strain or the sacrifice that family and friends have to deal with and go through, and husband and supporters in your team. So this isn't just a salute to Shannon, this is a salute to you, your family, your circle, all of those who have supported you along the way. They have allowed you to make this happen. And you have moved mountains, and we are appreciative for that work, that tenacity, that power, that energy that you have continuously given us. And, you know, one of the things that I'm going to continuously ask of you is to never stop engaging. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Shannon, you've been an inspiration to me because you act on what you believe in. It took a long while for me to even begin to do that. I had similar thoughts from a different perspective, but I didn't act on them. And you, with all your children and everything else that's going on with you, you find the time to do this stuff and to stick with it. So what's my excuse? You know, I hold that in front of me. So thank you very much for showing me what you can do.
Thank you. Thank you.
We've got another couple presentations. Of course, we want you to have this so you remember the service. Not that you're going to forget, because how could you forget any of us and the opportunities that you have had to serve. And also a gift that we want to make sure that you enjoy and thinking about us often in your service to our community. And it just reads, if I had my glasses, I could do this, but maybe you should read it.
It says, in appreciation to Shannon Sykes for your dedication and service to the citizens of Kalamazoo as a member of the 51st and 52nd. You read the bottom part right here. What's that say at the bottom?
Kalamazoo City Commission.
Perfect.
So, Commissioner, and you know I'm going to call you that every time I see you. Here's the thing. It's never simple. Never simple when you ask for the opportunity to serve people. Because we all know when we run for these offices, I'm not sure any of us receive 100% of the vote. And I don't believe in this room we receive 100% of the support. We have folks that don't agree, and sometimes they agree. I'm assuming we're going to have some of that tonight, and that's okay. But at the end of the day, we sit in these seats to serve. We use our hearts and our souls, no matter who agrees, no matter who likes us, no matter who likes who we love. We sit there because these folks, many folks, have given us the honor to serve them. And service is always an honor. So folks can agree with our tone, they can disagree with our tone, they can agree with how we dress or not, but the bottom line is we've been asked to serve. And you can only serve in the manner in which you feel is right. What moves you, your soul, and the opportunity of this city. And we know we have many, and we know we have much work to do. So that's what I like most, is that you call out the work. Not simple, not easy, sometimes ugly and large and messy. This is Play-Doh, baby, and sometimes we get it right and it's the most beautiful thing in the world. Sometimes, not so beautiful. But it's still what we're creating for all those that we serve. So for me, thank you for your service. Thank you for your time and your commitment. Thank you for these wonderful young people who will go on to lead us in other ways in the future. You have lots to be proud of. It was an honor to serve with you. Thank you.
Thanks again, and I wish everybody a wonderful night, a little bit shorter than the last one we had together. Have a good one.
Anyone wanting to make remarks related to Commissioner Sykes and her service, please step to the podium. You'll have 4 minutes and give us your name and whether you live within the city. Good evening.
David Benak, yes, I live in Kalamazoo. And I just wanted to take the opportunity I had to use the record today to express my gratitude for Shannon's work. I look at Shannon as an example for my own public engagement, even though she and I have fought bitterly on some things. And I'm sad that she's leaving the commission because I feel that she's the heart of the commission. She's fought with so many people, but she does it from her heart, from what she feels is right. And I think that that's a valuable component, and that's something that I hope the rest of us strive to do some of, because she's not going to be there to do it. And so I was thinking, what is the thing I want to talk about? Her heart, her passion, but I think that undersells it, because I think her intelligence is another really important aspect. Because though we fight and fight and fight, she always does it on the issues, and she does it from a reasoned and rational point, even though it doesn't always seem like it in the heat of the moment. And to me, this is what our community needs. I'm grateful that she's staying in the community, because I know she's going to hold everyone else's feet to the fire, and she's going to keep doing it. And I'm going to continue to look at her example and just strive to do the best I can to carry forward the work that she's shown us to be so important. So thank you, Shannon.
Thank you. Anyone? Good evening, sir.
Evening. My name's Carl Wiseman. Currently living in Portage. This is kind of, bittersweet, because I know she's moving on to do things that are better for her life, but the things she's done in this community, the integrity, the character, the drive that she brings, if just some politicians had 10% of the integrity and character that that young lady had, we'd be so much better off. What she's showing her children, there was an old philosopher that said, elders who plant trees, knowing they may never know their shade, have truly began to understand the meaning of life. So what we do here forward and the trees that we plant ourselves can make things better. And you, Mr. Urban, said that she taught you something. Now the thing is, you need to implement what she has taught you and carry on with the same passion and drive that this young lady has. Otherwise, what you said is nothing but empty words. But JFK once said, every achievement begins with the decision to try. So let's take an example from this young lady and move this community and this city forward to where it truly can be.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Alicia Johnson, and I live in the city. So I wanted to share with you an excerpt from my favorite poem, and it reminds me of Shannon. There is something in every one of you that waits, listens for the sound of the genuine in yourself. And if you cannot hear it, you will never find whatever it is for which you are searching. And if you hear it and then you don't follow it, it was better that you were never born. You are the only you that has ever lived. Your idiom is the only idiom of its kind in all of existence. And if you cannot hear the sound of the genuine in you, you will all of your life spend your days at the ends of strings that somebody else pulls. I'm so thankful for Shannon and that she doesn't live by strings that somebody else pulls. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I think Shannon has a big heart, and I know there are other people on the commission that really care about this commission. I think everybody here would not be on the commission if they didn't care about this community. I think I've talked to Don Cooney and his wife. I've talked to Jack Urban. Those are the main people I talked to. And you know, one of the people talked about a verbal tree or a fake tree. You know, like, but we need real trees because we have flooding. One oak tree will take 50 gallons of water per day. In 1 hour, it takes 150 to 200 gallons of water out of our river and doesn't flood then. And we're not managing things right. We need to get hold of the state of Michigan,
Sir,
the EPA, and get that money.
That's not
and
the
make
item
that
you're
happen.
commenting on right now.
Okay.
Okay,
Well,
thank
I'm
you.
just
And we
saying,
need-
this is a solution.
Thank you. Anyone else? Good evening.
My name's Zachary Lasser. Despite rumor, I do still reside in the city of Kalamazoo, even though I'm here only a couple days every other month. I'll be honest, Shannon. I didn't vote for you. I saw you as someone who just was saying what the popular things were that were going in the media and just doing that thing. And as I attended commission meeting after commission meeting and actually talked to her, I learned that that wasn't true. She believes what she says, and she's willing to walk the walk, unlike most people, and walk it a lot further than most people. I saw some of the things that she went through for standing up for the Bronson Park Freedom Encampment, and I couldn't put up with the things that she did. She had people on the left attacking her, people on the right attacking her. She even had the city's police department attacking her. And I'm not talking about the arrest in Bronson Park. I'm talking about the harassment of her family by the city's police department. I don't care who's running this year. I'm writing you in. And just thank you for what you've done for our community.
Commissioners, we are on item C, adoption of the formal agenda. Are there any changes? Hearing, Mr. Attorney.
I want to point out to the commission, this is the regular agenda. It is agenda item 2 on the regular agenda. It now looks, I think, is a little bit different than what you looked at 2 weeks ago. It was due to Scrivener errors. We've corrected it. The sum and substance hasn't changed, but the format has changed. It was couched in the form of a resolution. It really needs to be an ordinance since we are repealing ordinances. So I wanted to point that out to you and make a point on the record that it's nothing of substance, but it's more a matter of process and the format. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience wanting to comment on items under the consent agenda, that's items under F, that item will need to be moved to the regular agenda. If you have an item, please indicate at this time. Seeing none, Communications Manager Ritzman.
Nothing, Your Honor.
We're now on E1. I'll open a public hearing to receive comments on an ordinance amending Chapter 50, the zoning code, to create the Natural Features Protection Overlay District. Anyone wanting to comment during this public hearing, please step to the podium. You'll have 4 minutes. Give your name and whether you live within the city. And let me remind everyone in the audience that when 4 minutes is up, I'm going to ask you to be done. And the reason we put the clock there is so you know what time it is. So just make sure you know what time it is, because your microphone will shut off at the 4-minute point, and I will say thank you and ask you to relieve yourself of the podium and allow the next person. Thank you. Good evening, sir.
Hi, my name is Robert Peelish. I live at 2228 Springmont Avenue in the city of Kalamazoo, and I've been living in that house for about 30 years. Back in 1990, I worked with Mark Hoffman, Monty Piercy, and Renee Piercy to start the Asylum Lake Preservation Association. At the Oakwood Water Station, where I was working for the marathon, Mark asked me to come to the annual meeting of the Asylum Lake Preservation Association. 29 years. I kind of dropped out after the first year. They've been going strong ever since. But Mark wanted me to get back involved because the area to the northwest of Asylum Lake, the last remaining buffer zone for the ecological protection of Asylum Lake, is now at risk. I went on the cleanup on May 11th with other members of the Asylum Lake Preservation Association and took some pictures. This is what that area looks like now. This is the view of Asylum Lake from that area. And this is what Old Colony Farm Orchard looks like now, and what I see is proposed for that area if the zoning is changed and if this proposal is not adopted. So you can see clear cutting that area is not in the best interest of a buffer zone. We've got geologists that can explain it far more intricately than I can, but it's not good for Kalamazoo. And I'm here to support passing the ordinance to protect the area and vehemently encouraging the zoning commission to not change the zoning from residential, because our predecessors zoned that area residential because they had the forethought to realize that that area should never be made into a commercial zone. So right now, Asylum Lake has To the south, the industrial park. To the west, Old Colony Farm Orchard, which is being destroyed. And then to the northwest, this last remaining buffer zone. A couple years ago, I came here and I mentioned paved paradise, put up a parking lot. I talked about how my daughter was in my arms at the first Winchell meeting. And she said, when are we gonna have to stop quoting old folk songs about our lake? I got 42 seconds, okay. So the city commission at that time said, we can't do anything about that because it's an Ashtamo. Okay, this time you can do it. You can protect Asylum Lake and not let an out-of-state developer come in and clear-cut part of our city, put up another car wash in a market already saturated with car washes. And 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you.
Please, no applause, outbursts. Again, if you want to applaud, you certainly can do it in that manner. We have a lot of folks that want to speak, and we want to get through this. Ma'am?
My name is Susan Andrus. I live at 2413 High Point Drive. Okay. My name is Susan Andrus, and I live at 2413 High Point Drive. I live right next to the Asylum Lake Preserve. I'm also on the ALPA board, and one of the functions that I do for ALPA is that we have brochures about our organization, but I also created a trail map because the trail map gets people to take our brochure. And I fill those up I go around and fill up the boxes, and I go through about 150 or 250 of those a month. And the people that pick those out aren't the people that go there all the time, they're the people that haven't been there before and need to know how to get around. So a lot of people go in that preserve. It's well used. There are people there all the time. And when they have a cleanup, it's remarkably clean because people take care of it. My conclusion from putting out the brochures as often as I do is that there are a lot of people that use the preserve. Their visitors include fishermen, families with their kids, cross-country skiers, bird watchers, photographers, hikers, and dog walkers. It's an asset to our community. When the weather is good, the parking lot on Parkview and the parking lot on Drake are filled, and there are cars lining up on Winchell to go in there. So it's not something that a lot of citizens don't care about. Besides human visitors, there are 455 plant species, 117 bird species, 6 varieties of frogs, 6 kinds of turtles, a variety of mammals, including foxes, mink, beavers, and white-tailed deer. Approving the NFP is an important step to protect our green spaces throughout the city. But one thing to consider, the Imagine Kalamazoo, I actually went to some of the meetings, and a lot of it was because we got to vote on what kind of city we wanted. And I think that changing the zoning along Stadium Drive seemed like a logical thing. There are businesses all up and down there, but I think it was an oversight to not realize that it was going to put a treasure of this city at risk. And I think that it's a problematic piece of property. It goes down from Stadium Drive severely, so we require a lot of fill. And the part that's flat is really the part that's too close to the preserve. So I hope that you'll vote to use the natural features, but I also would like to see the voting and the zoning be taken care of too. I think the zoning should not change. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, sir. My name is Paul McNellis. I do not live in Kalamazoo, but I live in the county. I've worked and retired in Kalamazoo. I love the city. I love the place. I love the town. I grew up in Detroit, so this was a big change to me at 19 when I came here. I thought, boy, how could people live like this? They just close everything at 9 o'clock. I mean, I was used to running up and down Michigan Avenue in downtown Detroit at 2 in the morning with my hair on fire. That's where it went. So anyway, I've grown to know that slow down is great, quiet is great, and I think Kalamazoo is great. And this is a good step. This overlay protection, the document that you have that you're going to be voting on tonight is a good one. It's not about zoning. It's not specifically about Asylum Lake or Kleinstock or Bowl in the Clouds, which totally, those three preserves inside the city limits are well over 400 acres. And they're actively maintained. A lot of money is spent on them, a lot of man hours, which I've done myself a lot in all three of those. Thousands and thousands of hours are spent on those to try to preserve them. The overlay talks about not only those three preserves, but it also talks mostly about the incidental natural areas that we have, where the creeks go, where the rivers go through, where the embankments are, where the open space is, that native plants and animals thrive in actually right now. That's kind of a real unique situation. All of my work in conservation, all the conservation people that I have talked to say, no, 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 those are too small, they're incidental. The three preserves, they're too small, they're incidental, they really don't count. You can't have natural ecosystems in them. And to some degree, they're right, but you can if you make them happen. And that's what's happening in all three of those. Now, this overlay is not just about those three. Like I said, it's more, it more covers the incidental features that Kalamazoo has and shares within the community, within the city. And I think this document goes a long, long way to protect those. It doesn't go far enough to protect the three preserves. So you're going to see me again. And actually, when it comes to zoning, some people have talked about zoning. They've talked about specifically Asylum Lake. You're going to see me again and again and again when zoning hearings come up, et cetera, because I want more protection for those three preserves. But this is a good thing. Please pass it. And please don't forget that there's more work that needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sherry Sims. I'm a resident of Kalamazoo. I've been a resident for about 40 years. I grew up in the suburbs of Cleveland, and across the street from me was the Cleveland Metro Parks. And if you've ever been to Cleveland, it is called the Emerald Necklace. And read about it, because it's what a city can do to protect their natural spaces. And go there today because it's a wonderful place. That was my front yard. And we don't have hardly any places like that in Kalamazoo, but we have a few of them. And I am so glad to be able to say that the city officials of Kalamazoo, the Planning Commission, people from WMU, many neighborhood groups, business, environmental professionals, and at least 200 or more concerned citizens from all over the city have been diligently focused on learning about and working among ways to help preserve the natural features which help to make our city profitable, desirable, and a pleasant place to live, work, and to raise children. Protecting our natural features has been all of these people, it's been their focus for the past year. And it's admirable and it's necessary. Trying to get groups to agree on the best move forward, I know is challenging, but it can also be rewarding, and it has been, because I've been following and working with some of these people. The Natural Features Protection Ordinance that you're going to be voting on is not perfect, but it is a fair compromise. and it moves our city forward in the right direction. It creates a balance, it has restrictions, there are detailed consequences, and a statement, although we would like a little more than there, but there's a move in that direction. And that it tells us that Kalamazoo is aware, that we're concerned, and we're committed to protecting at least some natural space. We need to have that. We need our citizens to know that. My hope is that the plan will include, as previous speaker has said, more floodplains and habitat as it does for floodplains and habitat corridors. It'll also come to include the parts of the preserve and other parts to preserve within the city limits. We can do, and you can do so much more. This vote that you're going to take tonight is an easy yes. It's easy. There is a time to say yes. There will be a time when we vote for rezoning, that will be a time to say no. But please don't be afraid to stand up and help move our city in that direction that is beneficial for all of its citizens, future citizens, not just a few people, okay? There are many areas of the city that don't have natural features that need protection, and development is welcome there. It would be a fantastic development in addition to those areas where natural features are not in danger. Please protect what we have. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone, and you know the rest. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Prior to our next speaker, I want to remind everyone that E1 is about the text of the changes, and E2, the second item, is about the map. It states that, but I'm clarifying it for you in case you were not aware. Next, please.
My name is John Cruzer, and I'm a member of ALPA, Asylum Lake Preservation Association. I'm reading a statement from ALPA. Asylum Lake is a preserve. It is a place. Within this special place are vital features. These features cannot exist without a place. These places protect our water, provide habitat for wildlife, increase the mental, physical, and spiritual health of our citizens, and provide a refuge for our citizens to help counterbalance the stress and strain of modern life. Our concern is the proposed development of the property at the northwest corner of the preserve. This development will permanently destroy the tranquility and ecological integrity of this special place. It is incumbent upon those of us with the knowledge and power to be the agents of change that the younger generations and future generations deserve. It is imperative to protect these places and their natural features. We, the board and members of Asylum Lake Preservation Association, believe that the Natural Features Protection Zoning Overlay Ordinance, Draft 4, is a vital first step in providing better protection of this resource. Therefore, we support the Natural Features Protection Zoning Overlay Ordinance as approved by the Planning Commission. We look forward to working with the Planning Commission, other neighborhood organizations, and the citizens of Kalamazoo during the second phase of the Natural Features Protection Overlay that will specifically address those items mentioned as reserved, stronger protections, and the specific mention of preserves, places where these features exist, particularly providing better protection of the water quality of Asylum Lake and protection of the Asylum Lake watershed, the selection and implementation of the NFP Review Board, and more educational opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. I'm so glad today is here. My name is Judy Huxman, and I live in the Oakwood neighborhood for 13 years now. My concerns tonight are for the environment that has no voice, particularly the preserves and specifically Asylum Lake Preserve. I'm here in support of the Natural Features Protection Ordinance overlay. I've been involved with the formation of this ordinance for the last 6 months, and I believe it to be a good start to making a change in how properties located in the designated ecologically vulnerable areas are not developed using past standards of construction. I am not anti-business. However, I am anti-wholesale destruction of the environment for what has been observed as common building practices. I know there will be an adjustment phase for developers and their site planners and construction teams to figure out how to do less, how to protect what used to be bulldozed, and to work around elements of the environment that are not to be damaged or destroyed. Once this ordinance is in place and all the details are worked out, you will be acting in an environmentally motivated way when you pass the ordinance this evening. You will be demonstrating the concern for the environment which underlies all life in Kalamazoo and on this planet. If you listen to the reports on the airwaves concerning the biosphere, the waters of the world, the contaminants such as PFAS that are showing up everywhere, the frog species that are declining, the salt in our no longer fresh water, I could go on, and I would become fear-mongering, and that is not what I want to do. I'm trying to make a point. This is the opportunity to begin changing standard operating procedures at the local level right here in Kalamazoo. There is no use in expecting our federal government to step in and do anything to protect these grounds and waters and animal life. We have to do it. We are the rubber meeting the road, not to be run over by the big dollar signs of progress, but to drive the effort in these areas with the underlying ideas of protection. Please do the right thing by approving the Natural Features Protection Overlay Ordinance this evening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Hello, my name is Jessica Simons, and I'm here in my capacity as Vice President of Conservation Stewardship for the Kalamazoo Nature Center. I've been really thrilled to be part of the committee that helped develop the Natural Features Protection Overlay Ordinance, and honestly, it's been incredibly inspiring because I see this as an opportunity for our community to show what we value. We can show that we value the natural resources that surround us and that we recognize that those are of value to the residents of this community and that they improve the health and vitality of the community itself. So the Kalamazoo Nature Center has been around for 60 years in this community. And what the Nature Center really tries to do, our mission, is to connect people with nature so that they will care for the environment. But we not only do that because we think it's important to have people care and people be good stewards of the environment, we also do it because we recognize that people who care about nature are healthier, happier people. And this Natural Features Protection Overlay Ordinance takes a tremendous first step toward declaring that value we have as a community. It follows right on the heels of the Imagine Kalamazoo Master Plan of declaring our intentions of what we want to promote and how we want to grow. This ordinance does not limit development from happening. It does not prohibit economic development in our community. Instead, it stakes intention that we're going to do it in a specific way with an eye towards sustainability that protects the features that can help our community grow and help our people thrive. Thank you. We definitely encourage you to pass this ordinance, and you have the commitment of the Kalamazoo Nature Center that we will be there to support the implementation of the ordinance and to help with the other standards of sustainability that are written out in the master plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Hello. My name is David Carroll. I'm a resident of the city of Kalamazoo, and I would like to also argue in favor of passing the ordinance, but from a slightly larger perspective. One that Shannon actually brought up 2 weeks ago in this room, and that is the perspective of climate change. I am a professor in biological sciences at WMU. My expertise is climate change and its biological consequences. I teach grad and undergraduate courses on climate change. I run research training programs. My own research is about climate change. And it's actually absolutely clear that climate change is the most pressing threat to humanity and basically almost all species on the planet. There are two ways in which humans are changing climate now. One is very well known, and it gets most of the attention. That's burning fossil fuels. That's a really important way. The other way we are changing the climate is by cutting down trees. And about 20% of the carbon that we end up putting into the atmosphere comes from cutting down trees. It's not a trivial part of the change. It's a very, very important part. The carbon that was in those trees, either by decomposition or burning, becomes atmospheric carbon dioxide, and the trees also are no longer there to pull carbon out of the air. So anything we can do to prevent deforestation on any scale is an important thing. I think that by rights, leadership on this issue should be coming from the top. We should have federal policies that steer us towards a better future. The one we're headed towards right now is really remarkably frightening. And it's not going to be our future. It's going to be our children's, our grandchildren's future. By allowing deforestation in any capacity, what we really are doing is stealing the future from our children and grandchildren. We are taking away what could be a good future for them and giving them instead a horrible future. This is why Shannon was so passionate about it 2 weeks ago. And I think that's unethical. By rights, the federal government would be leading on this, but the federal government has decided to do nothing to prevent climate change and actually to open the floodgates a little bit farther. And that leaves then the burden on the shoulders of state and local governments. Fine, let's do what we can do. I think one of the most important, probably in my opinion, the most important role of government is to act on behalf of the common good. And to, when necessary, place the common good ahead of the individual good. And I think this is an example where Kalamazoo can do that. And those that benefit, those that are part of the common good, the recipients, include not only citizens of Kalamazoo, but also future citizens of Kalamazoo and future citizens of every place on the planet. I think there is no more powerful way that a legislative body can act in the common good than to do everything we can to prevent as much climate change as we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Those in line, would you also sign in on the sheet at the podium, please? That would help our clerk. Good evening.
My name is Paul Manstrom. I'm a longtime resident of the city of Kalamazoo, the last 29 years of which has been spent at my home at 806 Northampton. I want to assure you that I'm not trying to check baseball scores as I speak here. My printer wasn't working, and the statement I've written I'll have to read off my phone, so let the adventure begin. I am the current chair of the City of Kalamazoo Environmental Concerns Committee. I also served as the ECC's representative on the Natural Features Protection Advisory Committee. I had the good fortune of witnessing up close the outstanding efforts of the city staff and the committee of experts that they recruited in developing the NFP Overlay District Ordinance that is in front of you today. For those in the audience who are not familiar with the ECC, we are a citizen committee codified in an article of the City Code of Ordinances. The committee is tasked to track environmental issues in the city and, when appropriate, make recommendations to the City Commission on those issues. Pursuant to that responsibility, the development of the NFP Overlay District has been on the ECC's monthly agenda for over a year now. We have had numerous committee discussions on the subject, regular progress updates from both Christina and Jamie, and even hosted one well-attended public meeting in this very room. Sorry. The ECC's memorandum in support of approval of the NFP overlay district was submitted to the City Commission prior to the first reading at the May 6th Commission meeting and was a record document for that meeting. The committee had one more opportunity in our May meeting last week to review our support, and the 11 members of the ECC are still unanimous in urging your approval of this sound and very well thought out addition to the zoning ordinance that will promote thoughtful development in Kalamazoo going forward. The ECC does not believe that the approval of the NFP overlay district should be held hostage or that it should be altered in the interest of any small number of developers and individual properties. The ordinance before you allows for a fair and even application of its standards across the city. The city's zoning ordinance will allow other recourse and more appropriate venues for consideration of the development of individual properties that may be negatively affected by the overlay. These include the process of rezoning requests, requests for variances to the zoning code, and the updated site plan approval process. We, the ECC, urge you to take this first step to begin including consideration of our heritage of natural features in the future development of our city. We owe it to those natural features that were here long before we were a city, and we owe it to future generations of Kalamazoo residents who will appreciate our collective wisdom in preserving those inspiring and vital connections to the past. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Donna Jocelyn Tellum, and I am past president of Asylum Lake Preservation Association for 4 years. At this point, I could talk to you about saltwater runoff, native plant life, saving oak savannas, or the geological implications of development and the impact it has on forests, lakes, or I could appeal to your ecological side. But I'm going to put this in simpler terms that I think everyone will understand. As I personally look at Asylum Lake Preserve and the long battle since 1989 to keep this city treasure intact, an old song comes to mind. In 1970, Joni Mitchell sang Big Yellow Taxi. In that song, there are 2 lines that remind me of the battle we are once again waging now. The first line is, "Please don't pave paradise and put up a parking lot." The second line is, "We'll put the trees in a tree museum and we'll charge people $1.50 to see them." Think about that a minute. I do not believe that Mr. Tarani, not being a resident of this city, could begin to understand the cultural diversity or our town's history and what that means to the residents. The Vermeulen McMartin property is home to the only remains of the first railroad in the city of Kalamazoo. 1 trestle remains. The house is the oldest home in the city. How do we teach our children or our grandchildren about nature and history if there is absolutely nothing left to show them? There are several deer that call the Vermeulen property their home. This is going to make me cry. Each time I go by what is now a very busy intersection in our city, I always pause. I look at that small clearing on the Vermeulen property. It's just to the north and east of her house. It's like a little meadow. I always see them there each time I pass. There's always a doe and there's always a buck. When I came by the other day, I hit the red light. I was glad I did. And I paused and I looked like I always do to see if she and her buck were there. And they were. And guess what, guys? She was nursing her new baby fawn. I'm going to leave you with that visual tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hello, I'm Wendy Denning, and I am a resident of Kalamazoo. I know about that family of deer as well. I see them every time I drive by, and it breaks my heart because if we lose the preserve, they'll have no place to go. We are at a critical moment in the future and the history of our beloved city. Decisions made here tonight will affect our community forever. We citizens of Kalamazoo count on you officials to watch our collective backs and to ensure that our beloved city remains a wonderful place to live, to work, and to recreate. It's your responsibility to properly steward our beloved city, including the preservation and care of its parks, asylums, and its green spaces. You on the commission have the power to help preserve the green spaces in our community. Please take a moment to reflect on how it feels to stand in a copse of 100-year-old trees. You feel the shade they provide, you smell the fresh air they give us, and you feel the peacefulness they allow. Once you cut down towering 100-year-old trees, the peaceful place that they provided, the air that they help purify, will be gone forever, instantly gone. I reluctantly agree that the 16 or so acres at the corner of Drake and Stadium should allow for commercial development. I hope a compromise can be found whereby the developers can have a successful economic enterprise along the front street while maintaining the near pristine quality of Asylum Preserve at the southern rear of the properties. I thank the City Commission for incepting the idea of the Natural Features Ordinance and for imposing the 6-month moratorium on development while the ordinance has been drafted. I would like to see in phases 2 and 3 Asylum Preserve be given special designation as a preserve along with Kleinstuck and Bow in the Clouds. Another car wash, restaurant, and apartment complex will not add anything special to Kalamazoo. What makes Kalamazoo special, what makes it rich, are its gems like the Kleinstock and the Asylum Preserve. I implore the Commission to protect and preserve these precious gems and to adopt the Natural Features Protection Ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and City Commissioners. My name is Bonnie Alkema. I live in Parkview Hills, and I am a member of the Board of the Neighborhood Association, and I bring to you a message from that board that I will read and leave to go into the minutes. The Board of Directors of the Neighborhood Association of Parkview Hills is in favor of the Kalamazoo City Commission voting to adopt the Natural Features Protection Overlay and Ordinances. Our neighborhood is close to Asylum Lake Preserve and is directly impacted by destruction of any natural features in the area. Asylum Lake and Little Asylum Lake flow directly under Parkview Avenue into Parkview Hills and Cherry Creek. Cherry Creek flows to Willow Lake and Limekiln Lake, where water from Hillenbrook and the West Fork of the Portage Creek join to flow to the Kalamazoo River and ultimately to Lake Michigan. As good neighbors, we are concerned not only about our neighborhood, but also the environment, our ecosystem, and all the land along those waters. Therefore, the Neighborhood Association of Parkview Hills Board of Directors joins other neighborhood association boards in asking the Kalamazoo City Commission to vote in favor of adopting the Natural Features Protection Overlay and Ordinances. With this, our waterways, trees, plants, wildlife, insects, and all natural features will be protected. Without this, they stand unprotected. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Commissioners. My name is Suzanne Rose. I'm a resident of the city of Kalamazoo and have been for over 10 years. And I just want to note that when I first moved to Kalamazoo, I was so delighted to find a beautiful natural area such as Asylum Lake, and have hiked and bird watched and there successfully for many years. I want to commend the Planning Commission and the City Commission for developing this ordinance to help protect the natural features within the city of Kalamazoo. And with that, I'll let you get to your business.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Good evening, Commissioners. Tom Small. I live in the city of Kalamazoo. Scientists such as E.O. Wilson and Douglas Attomey tell us that there's simply not enough undisturbed wild land out there to preserve the ecosystems on which we depend, the wildlife that depends on those ecosystems and on which we as the human species depend. What does that mean for us? It means that we in the cities and the suburbs, in the developed part of the earth, which is about 90% of it, the wildlife depends on us. It depends on us as individuals, as neighborhoods, as cities, as landowners, as developers. It depends on all of us. We're losing, according to the scientists, about 75% of the biomass, the world biomass of insects, on which the birds depend, on which other wildlife depends. That wildlife, the insects, depend upon the trees. They depend upon what we, in a very abstract way, refer to as natural features, which are the wonderful living beings that are trees, that are shrubs, that are wildflowers, that are the insects, that are the birds, that are all of that ecosystem that we're so much a part of and that we participate in. This ordinance is a good first step. Is it enough to protect? No, not in itself. But what encourages me about it is that it is a first step, that it's envisioned as a first step. It has phase 2, it has phase 3. It will be followed by a climate action plan for the city. This is an ongoing concern and an urgent one. The British Parliament is the first parliament in the world to declare that we are in climate emergency. The UK Guardian, one of the world's foremost English-speaking newspapers, stops using the term climate change. They're now going to use the term climate emergency. They're not going to use the term global warming. They're going to use the term global heating. They hope that other newspapers, they hope that other citizens, they hope that other people will do the same. It's a first step, and it's a very important step. We all must do what we can because we are in a climate crisis, we are in a wildlife crisis, we are in an extinction crisis. And extinction begins with the disappearance of local populations, and we can see it. We are experiencing it all around us, the disappearance of local populations, which is the next step to extinction, and that's the next step to collapse of ecosystems on which we all depend. It begins at home, it begins on all of our land, it begins with us, it begins with the cities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Good evening. I am Margot Rebar. I am here to urge you to adopt this ordinance, but in addition, I want to encourage you to direct the planning department, if that be your role, to continue its work to complete those portions on floodplains and other aspects about the natural features protection, and to expand those areas that should be protected, the additional waterways, the additional slopes, the additional wooded areas that were not in the original overlay map. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Marcella Hunt. I've been a longtime resident of Kalamazoo. I currently live on Hazel Avenue, which is a little pocket that's landlocked by Lakeside Academy on one side, Kalamazoo Country Club on the other side, and Oakland Drive. We're this little island of small houses. We have a chunk of land, this is aside from Asylum Lake, that is 2.5 acres that is slated for development. This land was across the street from where my grandparents grew up, and it's this wild, beautiful woods with 100-year-old trees, and all of the neighborhood children come there and play. It's where I broke my arm when I was just a little kid climbing trees. Now there's been development that's been slated, and the neighborhood is, because we're in this little island, we don't really feel like we have a community of a neighborhood association to represent us because we're kind of landlocked. And I would like to suggest that this little 2.5 acre land chunk also be considered as part of the Protections Act as a natural feature protection to protect, so that not only do we have places like Asylum Lake that we can go to, but there are small little pockets that other neighborhood kids can go to. It's a really a beautiful little treasure that all the community uses around us. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Nehemiah Scudder. I live within the city at 345 North Burdick, which is also called the Rickman House, and I'm in number 303 there. I'd like to read a page to you from my newspaper, which is relevant to this whole discussion. It's entitled Humanism or Naturalism, a long-standing philosophical problem which is crucial to an understanding of the basis of freedom is the relationship between humans and the rest of reality. There are usually two alternatives. One, humanism. Humans are not just a part of nature, but possess a soul, free will, or something similar, which is thought to set humans outside the realm of nature. Two, naturalism. Humans are thought to be a part of nature, and their souls, free will, etc. exist. There is an explanation based solely on nature. Now, it should be pointed out right away that the above two words also have other meanings. However, throughout this discussion, these will be taken to be the basic definitions. Now, until a few years ago, the above question was still very unsure. Many thought the ethics in particular showed humans to be an exception to the rest of nature. Further, such questions as the appreciation of beauty, aesthetics, the use of words, semantics, etc., seem to many to be unexplainable in terms of nature. This is no longer the case. Why has humanism endured stubbornly to the end and not given up as more and more of the human domain came to be explained by natural ways? The fundamental cause would seem to be false pride. Just as many humans in general like to be told that theirs is a superior species, above and beyond all else in nature, if you ask yourself which of the above two positions makes one feel more superior, it is surely humanism. If one forgets about reality and simply picks the one which sounds most pleasing. Generally, throughout the ages, there have been a few naturalists who fought the prevailing humanism, both by teaching and writing. This has become a much larger number in recent times, as science has persuaded humans to give up their false pride and see themselves as part of nature rather than as masters above and beyond nature. It is not too surprising that some scientists have succumbed to false pride and taken humanistic stands. to make up for these many non-scientists have believed the testimony, even without being able to follow the details of the argument. Generally, naturalism seems to be gaining as time goes on. What difference does this make? In the sciences of ecology and environmentalism, it is essential to treat humans as part of the environment. When we exploit nature, we eventually harm ourselves. As a species, humans desperately need to come into a oneness with nature, not as a humanistic ego trip, but in terms of recycling garbage, avoiding long-lasting pollution, and generally becoming responsible naturalists, practicing environmentalism and ecology. There isn't much time left. Thank you, and I'm a naturalist, and I stop there.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Thanks for taking the time to listen to all of us tonight. I appreciate it. My name is Peter Kushner. I live in the Oakland Drive Winchell Neighborhood Association. I'm here tonight to represent the Oakland Drive Winchell Neighborhood Association as its president. Our association supports the approval of the Natural Feature Protection Zoning Overlay Ordinance as approved by the Planning Commission on April 9th of this year. We believe that this ordinance represents a reasonable balance between neighborhood concerns, environmental preservation, and sustainable development. It helps to protect our natural resources, yet allows for responsible development to allow our city to grow, and it sets a foundation for the city to move forward with the sustainable stewardship, management, and protection of our key natural features. Our board believes that this is a good start in helping to protect our city's endangered natural resources, and we look at this ordinance as a solid step forward to achieving that goal. We also recognize that this ordinance is designed to apply to lands throughout the city, as well as other areas in our neighborhood, not just the Asylum Lake Preserve, but Woods Lake, Arcadia Creek, the Kleinstuck Preserve, Woods Lake Park, Kensington Park, and the Oakwood Memorial Beach, as well as undeveloped strips of land between residential and commercial development along Stadium Drive. I know our association looks forward to participating in the Natural Features Protection Map Review process and educational outreach program, currently scheduled to begin this June. I would also like to take a minute to commend the city staff for the process that they've used in writing this ordinance. This included the creation of an ad hoc technical committee, as well as being inclusive, open, and responsive to the feedback of individual citizens, neighborhood associations, environmental organizations, and development groups. You'll find our letter included, I believe, in your packet, but I just wanted to reiterate it to you in case you didn't get a chance to go through everything. But we appreciate the time and the effort and your consideration on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Claire Baptiste. I live at 201 Balch, right downtown. And I live right by 3 ponds. I'm on the street that floods every time they go down my street when it floods. But my question is, I have rain barrels. If I use the water on my own property, am I stopping this? I mean, it says I can't stop the runoff on my property. So if I'm using a rain barrel and I'm redirecting all the rain off my roof to my own property, is that going to be a problem? Just all I want to know. It's not going to go into the preserves or anywhere else, but it already doesn't. Is that a problem?
Ma'am, we don't respond back because
Oh,
there's
you
so many
don't?
people, but one of the staff that will come
Okay.
and talk with you.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else wanting to address this item? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. Commissioners, the requested action is a motion to adopt the ordinance. Is there a motion?
Motioned.
Moved by Commissioner Cunningham, supported by Commissioner Cooney. We are in discussion. Commissioner Anderson?
I would just like to recognize Christina Anderson and Jamie. I'm sorry, Jamie, I forgot your last name, but haven't been around as long. I'm sorry? Yes, thank you. just because obviously this is an issue that is complicated, a lot of passion related to this issue. It tries to find a path between the fact that people live in a city and businesses develop, that there is housing, there is development in a city, that's somewhat of the nature of a city, and the fact that at the same time we want to maintain important natural features in the city that we live in. And so they took us through a process here, most intensely, but started long before that, related to this idea of protecting natural features, and have, I think, successfully brought us something that finds that path and brings us to this point. So thank you very much for that work, and thank you, City Manager, for supporting that work. I also want to remind people that what we are doing here tonight and not doing here tonight. You know, tonight, this action at this moment is approving this overlay natural features protection. We are not voting on whether any particular development is good or bad, whether any particular developer is, you know, seen in a positive or not so positive light. We are not affecting the underlying zoning. We're not changing zoning from residential to commercial or commercial to something else. We're not doing that. There's a process for those changes as well. So all the comments we've had about all those, you know, connected but yet somewhat tangential things are not what we're voting on tonight in these actions. What the action we're taking is specific to a natural features protection overlay, which affects the underlying zoning no matter what it happens to be. Some of it's commercial, some of it's residential. It could even affect a single family home and what can occur on that particular site once it has these additional features overlaying the zoning. And another thing I don't want for us to forget is that we do have a process that is driven by staff and driven by our ordinances of site plan approval. There is a site plan approval process for any particular development. As a matter of fact, there are components of that process which also ascribe value to existing trees, for example, based on size and that sort of thing. They also mandate a whole variety of requirements relative to buffers, to on-site water, to treating water, to making sure that water that is not treated, you know, goes back into our storm sewer system and as a consequence goes into our streams and rivers. There are those components already cooked into our site plan approval process. And in addition, there are also other guidelines and prohibitions that occur within the actual underlying zoning as far as what you must do and what kind of setbacks there have to be and buffers and that sort of thing again. So it's a rather complicated infrastructure with a whole variety of components, and what we are doing this evening is overlaying some portions of the city, which will come up at our next vote here as far as the portions, the maps, with this natural features protection overlay. So it's a rather complicated and interactive set of things that we're doing here, but I just want to make sure that we're all clear what the specific action is that we're taking tonight, and that's based on, you know, the great work that's been done by city staff, but also has incorporated a lot of input in a very transparent way from people who have professional expertise and people who just have community interest into this, this ordinance that we have here tonight. So hope that helps. Appreciate everyone's participation.
Commissioner Cooney?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I think it's wonderful to live in a community where people feel so strongly about the importance of nature, natural beauty, and wonderful things we have in this community. Your presence here tonight, the letters that you wrote us, I think are just great and really warm my heart. 6 years of my life, I lived in inner city Brooklyn, in one of the most densely populated areas in the world. I could walk out on my front steps and look out and see 14 high-rise buildings, low-income public housing. There were no parks. To get to a park, I had to go walk about 4 blocks and get on an elevated train and ride 20 minutes to the Botanical Gardens, Brooklyn Botanical Gardens, and I would do that to keep my humanity. So when I moved out here, I thought I was moving into a park. And in a lot of ways, I did. I did move into a park. I love this area. I love all the beauty. My wife and I are great outdoors people. We love Asylum Lake. We walk it at least once a week. So I believe that it is so important that we do everything we can to preserve our natural resources, because I believe it is what makes us human. So for ourselves, it's important to have this. But I think, as a couple of the speakers pointed out, Dave Carew especially at this time, when climate change is so real and when the rainforest is being devastated, it is important for cities like our own to set examples for the nation and for the world. And secondly, I think what Tom Small pointed out also is very important. We need to preserve the natural resources, not just for ourselves, but for all nature. So I think it's great that we have this opportunity to take a stand and support our love and our dedication to the natural environment in which we live.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other comments? Commissioner Urban?
I'll be brief. I think that this first issue that we're going to be voting on, the one that's before us right now, I think has got pretty broad support. So I'm not going to belabor my support of it, but I would like to point out that this NFP ordinance proposal is raising the bar for our whole community on what we expect to see in terms of environmental stewardship in our community going forward. So I view this as a welcome development, and I want to thank all the people who helped participate in creating this document.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Knott. Yes. Mayor Hopewell.
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. Motion carried. E2, I will now open a public hearing to receive comments on an ordinance to rezone properties throughout the city with the Natural Features Protection Overlay District. Anyone wanting to comment during this public hearing, please step to the podium. You'll have 4 minutes. Give us your name and whether you live within our city. You can speak first, ma'am. Sign in after, if you would. Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, my name is Erin Schultz, and I've lived in Kalamazoo since I graduated from college, and before that was Matawan, and I really love living here in the city. I am a part of that very tiny neighborhood that Marcella mentioned. We don't have a lot of representation because we are so close-knit and remote, if there is such a thing within the city. I would like to encourage you to consider those small areas that are not publicly seen as you drive by, especially places off Oakland Drive. That is our very main thoroughfare through the city from I-94, with all of those people coming to look at Western Michigan University. When they get off 94, that's the direct route. So we want that to stay nice and pretty and maintain those natural features in that area. Specifically, the Oak Ridge neighborhood, which we are members of, there's about 50 houses, a little less than 50 houses. And there is a 2.5-acre piece of property right behind my 2.5 acres on Ruthin Road. I purchased our house, or my husband and I purchased our house for our family 2 years ago from the son of the people who built it with a well-known architect in 1957. We got it from the family and expect to keep it with our family because this is something important to us. Behind our 2.5 acres, the original lot was subdivided in the early 2000s, and now there's 2.5 acres that is projected to be developed into some high-end condos. Nobody in our neighborhood is very excited about this, and unfortunately, because we are so small and we don't really know where we belong, are we West Nidge Hill or are we Oakwood?
But we would like to encourage you to consider the properties surrounding White's Lake, the Country Club, and especially Lakeside Academy. There are some beautiful natural features in those areas, and we would like to preserve those for everyone to experience as they enter our beautiful city. Please consider that, and remember our small neighborhoods that are just as important as our big preserves, because those are our little preserves within this city that we are able to enjoy ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Rick Shell. My address is 3313 Stadium Drive. I spoke on May 6th and would like to reiterate my thoughts and concerns. As I stated before, I am involved in 11 parcels along Stadium Drive that have been included in the Natural Features Protection Overlay District. All 11 properties are currently developed and extend from Hertz Rent-A-Car through Buffalo Wild Wings. These parcels do not meet the criteria for this new district. There is no basis for the inclusion of these parcels. No analysis of these properties has been completed by the city, as the city admits in the commission agenda report, and I quote, "is a view of the city from 10,000 feet up." I have made several requests to meet with the city on site. However, they have been unwilling to do so. I believe these parcels are only included because there was a squiggly line drawn on the master plan across these properties. For these reasons, I kindly request that these parcels be removed from the map and the ordinance. I am happy to discuss these properties with the city and the possibility of being included in the next phase. Once again, I kindly request that you remove these 11 parcels from the map and the ordinance. And as always, thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Haji Tarani. I reside in Stevensville, Michigan, on Lake Michigan, and love our state's natural resources no less than anyone. I chose Kalamazoo for our investment because it is close to my home, lacks the services we offer, and is a nice-sized city with a small city feel. We understand what the city is trying to accomplish, and as you will hear, we're committed to the same values. We're not raising objections to the NFP. We're here simply to ensure that NFP overlay map reflects our shared values of 1, protecting our natural resources, 2, intelligent balancing of resources, and 3, fair and consistent zoning practices. Let me start by saying that before I buy any site, I look at the city's master plan as part of my pre-purchase investigations. I contacted the city staff to ensure the site was viable for what we wanted to do with it. In writing, I was told that it was master planned commercial. I was sent an overlay which showed approximately a southern third of our property designated for natural features protection. Although what exactly that meant was not clear to me or the city, it was clear that NFP would only apply to the southern third of our property. Given our commitment to natural features protection, and after further talks with the city staff, I became comfortable with that thought. Your city went one step further and in writing encouraged us to apply for commercial rezoning in November of 2017, shortly after we bought the property. In fact, that happened before we bought the property. Again, this all took place before I was obligated to buy the property and pay $2.5 million for it. Had the discussion about the NFP involved the entire site, I would have never bought the property. After we closed on it and went to rezone it, we were asked to hold off on our rezoning and participate in the NFP group to protect the natural features on the southern third of our property. The explanation was that it would be to our collective advantage. In effect, we allowed our property to be used as a test site, delaying our development plans 18 months. The NFP group consisted of experts from the city, Western, Michigan State, DEQ, and many others, large group. We met with the group at least a half a dozen times and even had members of it do site visits with us to determine how to best protect natural features on our property. This entire process focused solely on the southern third portion of our property that NFP was to apply to. We invested $100,000 to research solutions that would assist the protection and preservation of Asylum Lake, large clusters of trees, natural slopes, and the creatures that make Asylum Lake their home. When we bought this property, we made a commitment to this community to invest over $50 million in it, creating a substantial number of jobs and tax revenue, with no expectation of any abatement or tax breaks. You're voting on an overlay tonight that has taken our non-NFP parcels and subjected all of them to NFP, in contrast to all your previous intents and actions. In conclusion, I ask you, I'm not here to ask you for any favors. We followed your master plan. We bought the property because it was master planned NFP only on the southern part. And now it is all in NFP, in contrast to your own master plan or any conversations we ever had with you. That doesn't seem right. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Thank you. Mike Danch from Danch, Harner & Associates, 1643 Commerce Drive in South Bend, Indiana. My firm provides planning, civil engineering, landscape architecture services for our clients. My planning experience comes from my prior position as senior planner for Area Plan Commission in St. Joseph County, Indiana. We provided planning services based on Mr. Tarani's active work with the NFP group and framework that they wanted us to work within. It was always understood that the upper two-thirds of the property was not part of the NFP district, with more restrictive development on the NFP portion in the southern third, which fronts Asylum Lake, consistent with your master plan. The master plan includes only the lower third of the property as part of the NFP district. This makes planning sense based on the future land use. Given the extent of the existing commercial development on Stadium Drive, the property fronting Stadium is best suited for such uses. This balance is a value that the city has expressed to us repeatedly in every meeting or conversation that we have had based on the city's master plan and the one that we share. Indeed, our commitment to this balance and natural features is so strong that we went above and beyond the confines of the NFP standards. Working with the NFP district in 2018 and the site survey work we have performed, we became aware that the city has a significant stormwater runoff problem, where storm runoff from Stadium Drive allows untreated water across the property near the northeast corner and proceeds unimpeded into Asylum Lake. Surface runoff into any lake is problematic because it carries all sorts of contaminants, chemicals, salts, oils, completely untreated into the lake during any rain event. By late 2018, we had a preliminary site design that addressed the requests of the NFP group, and we had incorporated a stormwater detention system that not only captured the stormwater generated from the site, but also the untreated stormwater that has been contaminating Asylum Lake from off-site sources. In our design, the untreated contaminated water is channeled to a detention basin, filtered and treated through a bioswale system, allowing the slow and natural infiltration into the ground, which allows for the natural cleaning of the surface runoff. That component of our proposed design would be carried forward if the property, if properly configured. The north parcels of the property are excluded from the NFP, leaving the south third subject to the NFP. The design layout will look different since the final version of the NFP ordinance contains new elements that we had not seen in the prior parts of 2018, but the overall development is still doable in this configuration. However, if the northern two parcels are included in the NFP overlay, the property will not be capable of development at all without securing substantial variances from nearly every aspect of the NFP. And even if such variances are granted, the development footprint of the site is shrunk to such an insignificant portion that it renders the site essentially incapable of an economically viable development. The balance so carefully struck in the master plan through the city's efforts in balancing Stadium Drive commercial development with the protection of the Asylum Lake will be lost while rendering the property essentially undevelopable. The balance struck in your master plan, which guided the NFP group that we worked with, applied the NFP for only the south one-third portion of the property. That makes sense in relation to the natural features that we want to protect and the commercial development which the site deserves. Inclusion of the two adjacent parcels to the north, the NFP overlay undoes this balance in rendering them essentially undevelopable and doesn't make sense from a planning standpoint. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Matt Callender. I represented Mr. Tehrani in the acquisition of the property. I was actually really surprised when I was asked to be here today because it was earlier today in which I heard from Mr. Tehrani when he informed me that as of recent, and this is my interpretation, the NFP was to be spread to the portion of the site in which we were led to believe, I was led to believe, was always intentionally to be commercial. There was always an intention of the southern portion of the site to have the NFP overlay. The owner, now owner of the site, was always very aware of that. And in all of the meetings in late September, November of 17, early 18 that I was a party to, there did seem to be a intentionality between all of the parties to protect that portion of the site, to honor Asylum Lake. And I thought everyone was working in unison. There was a consciousness from both owner and community to try to find a mutually acceptable path that honored the master deed of 2025. And I'm just going to take a couple excerpts from city staff, emails I pulled, and I pardon you, I didn't have much time to prep for this. But an email on September 28, 2017, prior to Mr. Tehrani's acquisition, I have an email that says the map is attached for current zoning and future land use 2025. The future land use 2025 will allow the rezoning to commercial. I've run this by the city planner, and they are in favor of a rezoning. A follow-up on October 6th, a line. And this is even clarifying the NFP. However, the plan also denotes a natural protections designation on the south portion of the property. This is pre-acquisition. Then a follow-up email that says, we recognize the frontage along Stadium Drive is appropriate for commercial development. They go on to say that this is represented on the future land use plan, which recognizes both the appropriateness of commercial on stadium frontage and the sensitive features along the shared boundary with Asylum Lake Preserve. October 9, 2017, pre-acquisition. Every meeting I sat in, there was a group consciousness to support that. There's a couple things from the policy considerations I saw, 5 factors to consider when reviewing rezoning requests. Number 1, alignment with the 2025 master plan. Number 4, compatibility with surrounding uses. This is very much in line with the surrounding uses. I feel like there was a lot of forethought that went into the inclusion of the NFP. I support it, the now owner supports it. I just think that now it's reached this broad emotional level and you have a very difficult task in front of you. I am a 3rd generation Kalamazoo native. My son is 4. He will be a 4th generation Kalamazoo native. We've been to Asylum Lake. We go to Sherman Lake. We do the Celery Flats. We're trying to get out to the new Kalamazoo College land on West Main. We appreciate the outdoor nature. I can appreciate everyone's passion here. But I think we're misguided in looking at least for this single issue that we need to honor the mutual intentionality of what was discussed over the last year and a half to preserve the southern portion with consciousness, to honor the NFP, but also honor the master deed and the commercial development along Stadium on the northern piece. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
West Michigan Avenue, City of Kalamazoo. In addition to the points discussed by my colleagues, I wanted to just take a moment and discuss our shared value of fair and consistent zoning practices and why excluding the northern 2 parcels from the NFP overlay is the only way to advance that value. First, excluding the parcels would be consistent with the master plan. As you know, the master plan is a set of long-term aspirational document which sets and governs the planning goals and objectives of the city. In the master plan, only the southern third of the property is designated for inclusion in the NFP. The reason for this is, as Mike indicated, to reflect the balance to be struck at this corner between the Stadium Drive commercial development and the protection of the Asylum Lake Preserve. In order to be consistent with the master plan, which is what the city expects whenever someone comes in for a rezoning, the northern 2 parcels, which are adjacent to the NFP, would need to be excluded from the overlay. Second, the city has indicated that the northern 2 parcels were included in the NFP overlay because at the time the overlay map was drawn, a portion of those parcels was touched by the NFP. So they included it to address what we call a split zoning concern, where part of a parcel is zoned X and another part of that same parcel is zoned Y. However, We adjusted the boundary lines in a way that eliminates the split zoning problem and maintains the planning intent expressed in the master plan. As it currently stands, the northern two parcels are adjacent to the NFP, not in or touched by it. And the city can easily be consistent with the master plan by excluding the northern two parcels from the overlay without implicating the split zone concern. Finally, consistency of application of the zoning is critical value of both the city and its constituents. Although much of the talk this evening may well lead one to conclude that this ordinance was designed specifically for our site, that is not supposed to be how zoning works. They are supposed to be ordinances of broad, consistent, fair application. In this case, all up and down Stadium Drive, there are at least a dozen instances of where property that is touched by the NFP is included in the NFP, and property that is adjacent to the NFP is not. Indeed, the northern two parcels are the only example along Stadium Drive where property that is merely adjacent to the NFP is nevertheless included in the overlay. This type of singling out is not in keeping with our shared values, and yet another reason why excluding the northern two parcels from the overlay is the only way to preserve those shared values. Haji, Mike, Matt, and I have covered a lot of ground demonstrating our commitment to our shared values of protecting Kalamazoo's natural features and Asylum Lake in particular. We've shown how we've invested substantial time and resources in furtherance of those values, and critically, we've shown how excluding the parcels adjacent to the NFP out of the overlay are not only consistent with those values, but in fact, consistent with the underlying principle guiding both my client and the city throughout the last 18 months. Moreover, we've shown how excluding these adjacent parcels from the overlay would be consistent with the proper balance of commercial development along Stadium Drive and the protection of the natural features along the southern third of the property abutting Asylum Lake Preserve. Finally, we've shown how excluding the northern portions of the property from the overlay is consistent with the city's value of fair and consistent zoning practices. Excluding the northern parcels is consistent with the master plan, respects and avoids concerns about split zoning, and is consistent with the city's treatment of similarly situated parcels up and down Stadium Drive. On the contrary, including these parcels would not only run counter to the master plan, but it would violate our shared value of seeing fair and consistent zoning. For all those reasons, we respectfully request that the Commission do what is right, do what is consistent with its values, and exclude the northern two parcels from the NFP overlay to implement the compromise the city struck in the master plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Dean Hauk. I live in Kalamazoo. It's wonderful to be talking to you, Mayor Hopewell, and the rest of the commissioners again. What you know about me from 1988 on is that I go to the meetings. I listen to what's being said, and I am now confused. I don't like that, and I'm sure you don't like it either. I don't remember when, because I went to almost all of the Imagine Kalamazoo meetings. I don't understand how some of those parcels got marked commercial rather than residential. I don't know when that happened, and yet I was in the room. I was listening. I was hearing what I thought the people were saying. I do not know about the emails that were sent back and forth between whomever and whomever. I'm surprised that some of the things that were told us this evening, read to us this evening, were actually received by you or received by the city or whatever. I think you all do a marvelous job. I'm very, very proud to be a citizen of this community. And as you know, I've lived all over the world. And this is the place that I came back to run my father's store and to be a member of this community when he was ready to retire, partly because I knew I could go to your meetings and I could find out what was going on and I could understand. Why is some parts of it now commercial rather than residential? When did that happen? Why is that being divided up? When were these conversations going on? When were these emails being sent? We've been told time-wise when they were sent, but I don't understand the evolution of thought. And I am hoping that all of you at least can understand the steps that have been taken and stay true to the concept of leaving that part that was residential, all residential, and not turning some of it into commercial, thus trashing even more of our beautiful spaces. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Paul McNellis, it's me again. I just wanted to say about the map, it's a good start, like the NFP overlay language codes. There's a lot of work that needs to be done on it. I'm not so sure about taking anything off of it right now, but there's definitely some properties need to be added. Glaring example is Kleinstock Preserve. Kleinstock Preserve is nice and green on the NFP, but none of the adjacent properties are. So any of the neighbors right now could build right down to the preserve. Kleinstock's 48 acres, right in the middle of Kalamazoo, behind the YMCA. Bobby, you've been there, or Mayor Hopewell, you've been there. So is Jack. The surrounding property, the property that the neighbors own, that is contiguous with the natural woodland features and the upland woodland features, makes the whole thing about 88 acres. It's almost double. So those properties is what Kleinstock is concerned about. So we're anxious to get those on the map and to make the proper adjustments for other places, as some of the other speakers have talked about, their little oasis. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Lori Holmes. I'm very rarely at a loss for words, even when I'm speaking with you, but tonight I'm stunned.
Ma'am, do you live in the city?
Pardon?
Do you live in the city?
You're talking to someone who's trying to avoid the hearing aid people, and I did not hear what you just said.
Do you live in the city?
Yes, I live at 2417 High Point Drive, which is, of course, next to Asylum Lake. I'm talking about the request for exemption on Mr. Tirani's part, and we have requested the written record of the communications that we have heard about from Mr. Tirani, but we have not received those as yet. And the shock is that somehow Mr. Tirani and his company were given the impression that it would be fine to develop the area along the north edge of the preserve as commercial. And we share, along with many of our colleagues, the fact that many of them were at the meetings when all of this was discussed. And I believe I brought up last time that a number of us were shocked when we saw the master plan designating that area as commercial. So that's the first problem here. The second problem is that we are sad that Mr. Tirani has paid almost twice as much for a piece of property than it would be valued at, and somehow was convinced that he was going to be able to get this investment back. He stated this evening, and his team has stated, that the city told him. Well, we are the city. Many of us have been very closely involved with these master plan processes, and none of us can remember ever being asked whether this would be a good idea. So it's very unclear to us how this whole project started. And why Asylum Lake so much this evening? I think it's an example of what the city's values are and what we want to leave our children and our grandchildren. And in a few weeks, when maybe the dust of this is settled, the city is going to start working on some very important projects, and the citizens are going to put the same kind of talent and effort and energy that has been put into this NFP process and other process, shared prosperity and others. But there's a risk, and the risk is that to the citizenry who cannot understand how the situation has arrived where it is today, that risks looking like window dressing if the community has turned its back on what many of us see as our most precious natural resource. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening, and thank you. I'm Karen Larson. I live in the city of Kalamazoo. I've been sitting here listening to a number of the people that came up here. As an educator for all of my life, I've worked with some of those people. I've worked with some of those people that are talking about the science changes that are happening in our environments. And you have poets, you have doctors of science, of ecology, of animals. Amazing group of people here. But you had an amazing group of people that were working on this ordinance and working on the map. If we look at the latest statistics, they are really sad. I could tell you about the decrease since 1970 of all of the populations that we need in able to live sustainably. But a couple of the most important things are, one, that humans have impacted 83% of all the land surfaces, including the waters in this world. That mass extinctions have happened many times before, but none of them had a human component to it. I agree. I have asked time and time again as to when that piece of property was redesignated in the master plan as possibly being rezoned. No one has been able to give me an answer to that. I remember talking about the Winchell area and the corridor to the Winchell area, and about the same time, we were still going to the meetings, and the meetings were still holding it as zoned as just family zoning. So I'm very confused by that. The other piece that I'm confused about is this new map for the corner for the Vermilion property. I had not seen it. I went to the community meeting that they presented the site plan at, and I have to tell you, none of us were pleased. None of us were happy. We had a number of questions. But in that, we never saw this property relabeled or positioned. And the only time I can figure out that this property was starting to be looked at differently was prior to the planning committee. To me, that's a little late in the process. Not only that, I don't see as tonight as an exemption for anyone. I see this as putting the map into process so that we can continue on. There is plenty of time for rezoning. There's plenty of time for variances. There's plenty of time for talk. Finally, I look at the people that are here. And I remember an astronomer telling me once that if you look in the sky, each star represents 10,000 other stars behind it that we can't see. I say the same thing about this audience. There are thousands of other people in Kalamazoo that are hoping you pass this map as it is so we can progress and then hold the discussions we need to. It's been an amazing process. I have been very pleased to be a part of it. And to have listened to Sharon talk at the last meeting with her passion and her care, I hope you remember her as you take this vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Tom Holmes, I live in the city. I think there's some misperceptions and maybe some disingenuous ways of presenting things. The master plan is one thing, an aspirational document, which was talked about. It's not zoning. It's not a final plan. I know that because I remember about 25 years ago, we were trying to save the Arboretum, 80 acres plus that is in the Arcadia neighborhood. And it was on the master plan that was zoned green space. And at that time, the city was already short of green space. And if you go up there now, you see it was developed. It wasn't saved. The master plans are plans. They're ideas. And I think here, I think that the realtor was disingenuous, and he actually called it a master deed. We all know that it's not a master deed. It's a direction that we might go in, and we can see that it was in a very soft, non-community involvement way shifted to commercial. And the reason I think maybe even that people were willing to just kind of at the last minute put it in as commercial is because they knew that it had to go through another process. It's zoned residential. And if you look at that property, the adjacent property is not commercial. The adjacent property is the housing development right next to it, right? And quite a number of housing units. So it's not commercial right next to it. The other thing is if you go out and look at that property, it drops down about 15 feet right from the road. It is not a practical place for commercial development, but it is 17 acres of woodland that if we remove it, it will look like across the street. Look at that picture of the orchards now. That's what it'll be. And the fact that the global warming little steps, actually 17 acres is significant. All right, so I appreciate your patience. Sorry this is so long for you, but we had to say it. All right, thanks.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Suzanne Rose. I have a home in the Millwood neighborhood of Kalamazoo. I just want to say that after all of the staff time, the planning commission time, your time, the public meetings that have been held to develop the natural features protection ordinance and the maps, I think it is crazy to adopt the ordinance and map now and then immediately start granting exemptions from it. I mean, what's the point of going through all that work?
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Diana Morton Thompson. I live in the Oakland Drive, Winchell neighborhood, and I'm a member of the NFP Technical Committee. Like others here tonight, I've come to express my personal opinions regarding the NFP ordinance and the associated NFP map. I wrote a bunch of words on a piece of paper, but I think that's a moot point now. Congratulations on passing the NFP ordinance. So I'm going to try to focus my comments on the NFP map. But that's a little hard to do because the ordinance language and the map are part and parcel of the same thing. It is the map which sets the foundation for which parcels will need to be rezoned. And without the rezoning, the NFP ordinance language is just good wishes. It isn't going to change anything on the ground. So when you think of it that way, the NFP ordinance and the map, they're really the result, part and parcel of a multi-year process, a process that started with the seeds planted in the master plan, where it was clearly articulated that as a community, environmental responsibility and sustainable development are core key values. And now those seeds germinated during the NFP process, where there was extensive and robust give and take and back and forth between individual staff members in the city, the NFP Technical Committee members, and the public at large. And throughout that process, the language of the ordinance changed and it evolved and it became more cohesive and actually more elegant in its structure. And we had drafts 1, 2, and 3, but guess what stayed the same? The map. We had the same map that was shown to us throughout the very same process. At the citywide meeting and before that at the 2 neighborhood meetings, at the meeting with the environmental group, at the meeting with the developers. This was the map that was in the packet that went to the Planning Commission meeting. Is that the map that was approved by the Planning Commission? I believe it was. So if you think about this as a process, we've been through as a city, as a community, a process, and we need to respect and honor that process. We have a process moving forward. Everybody's looking forward to NFP 2, Phase 2 and beyond. Because you've already heard tonight, there are people that want more parcels included and there are people that want parcels excluded. But there is a process for that. Let us take this first step. Let us set the firm foundation of approving the map as it was presented to the community, as it was agreed upon by the community. And then let the process take care of the rest through phase 2, where we can thoughtfully and meticulously go through, whether it's a parcel around Asylum Lake or whether it's a parcel over in Spring Valley or along Portage Creek. They all can be dealt with in a thoughtful, meaningful way. So please, I urge you, vote yes, give the second half of the NFP ordinance the foundation it needs to go forward and be a success. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Hi, my name is Sharon Deaver, and I am a City of Kalamazoo resident, and I am also on the Environmental Concerns Committee for the City of Kalamazoo. Going off of what she said, there's been a very long process that's been great, transparent, and everyone's been involved, as you can see. And I really hope that you understand that we need all of this to pass and that we are going to continue to work in phase 2 to make sure that this is even better for everyone and especially the environment that we live in.
Thank you. Next, please.
Tom Small. Good evening again, Commissioners. I was a member of the Technical Advisory Committee, and much of my advice had to do with trees, woodlands, wildlife corridors, that kind of thing. My understanding is not that of a developer, it's not that of an engineer, it's not that of a landscape architect. My understanding is of natural features and their preservation. That's my expertise, that's my experience. My reading of the Natural Features Protection Ordinance and its standards suggests strongly to me that whatever the zoning of the property along Stadium Drive that is under question here, whatever it is, the standards apply, and that applies to it as residential or as commercial property. That does not, however, make any of that property undevelopable. It only adds some further standards to what Commissioner Anderson has explained very well is a very complicated, many-step process that is difficult to fulfill adequately and perfectly. What the standards ask for is as small a footprint as possible, a careful preservation of what will remain, and a replacement for what aspects of a woodland or whatever have to be taken away in order to provide for that footprint. That does not make the property undevelopable. It may make it a little more difficult, but it doesn't make it undevelopable. And the replacement, as I understand it, does not even have to be all on the same property if that is not ecologically feasible and desirable. But there has to be replacement, and it has to be given to the objective of preserving and enhancing the city as a whole, as an ecosystem, which it is. The city is an ecosystem. The preservation, ultimately, its aim is preservation of an ecosystem, part by part, tree by tree, shrub by shrub. That's possible, whatever that property is zoned. I do not believe that the standards we worked so hard for and that the city staff worked so hard for make that property undevelopable, no matter what the zoning is. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wanting to address the commission on this item? Seeing no one, commissioners, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and we'll be back after that. We have reconvened. Commissioners, on this item, the requested action is a motion to adopt the ordinance. Is there a motion?
I move that.
Moved by Commissioner Urban. Supported by Vice Mayor Knott. Before we go into discussion, I'm going to have, Mr. Manager, I think it would make sense to have staff come up and address some of what they heard this evening.
Yeah, Christina Anderson, our city planner, will come up and hopefully clarify some things and explain some of the details of how this all rolled out.
Sure.
Madam Planner?
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm happy to answer any questions, but if you would allow me first, I wanted to be able to address a couple of points in terms of process. So I think there are 4 things that I want to touch on. So first of all, it's very typical for us to get calls. We get calls every day asking questions about what a property is zoned, what a property is noted on our future land use plan. These projects, sometimes they go from A to Z and become complete. Sometimes it's just calls and questions, but it's pretty common for us to have those conversations with folks about what a property is zoned and what it's marked on, and there's a future land use plan. As it relates to the parcels that we've been discussing for a large portion of the evening, those at the corner of Drake and Stadium, those have actually been in the master plan as commercial since the 1998 master plan, for the most part. So we've had a 98 master plan, a 2010 master plan, and the most recent iteration. And so the commercial as an appropriate use in that location, that commercial frontage, has been there since 1998.
Madam Planner, could I interrupt you? You said
Yes,
for the most part. That was part of what you said. So I
of
think
course.
someone's
So,
going to ask you what
yep.
that means.
So a portion of the property in the 98 plan is listed as open space, and the rest is red commercial, and I'm happy to show you the map. So, but since 1998, commercial frontage has been something that has been noted as appropriate in that location. And staff, that is the way staff feels, and that is what's reflected in those emails of which you heard little snippets of in the conversations from some of the speakers this evening. A commercial frontage, absolutely appropriate. We've always answered that way, and that is what you heard reflected in the email pieces that you read. I think Commissioner Anderson said it earlier when we were talking about the text piece of it, that this is, we're not talking about rezoning a property tonight, but ultimately when we look at properties with NFP on them, it's not what they're developed for, because the underlying zoning is going to dictate that. It's how it happens. And I think some of our other speakers tonight really hit on that as well. 3, we treated, I want to be very clear that we treated the properties at the corner of Drake and Stadium the same that we treated other properties when we were looking at both the future land use plan back in 2017 as well as creating the natural features protection overlay ordinance. Now, we should be very clear that when we created that map, we were using a different set of parcel lines that exist today. Because as you heard from the applicant on April 8th, right before the Plan Commission meeting, the owners changed the property lines to create 2 new parcels, leaving 1 parcel untouched. And the work that we did, really looked at how the parcels were originally, the original configuration. 4th, with the process that we had over the last 6 months, with the information that we have from the future land use plan, with all of the data that we used, we put forth a plan that was reviewed by the Plan Commission, recommended to you in a specific form for the Plan Commission, and who heard the people, the same folks tonight were at Plan Commission and requested their properties to be removed or changed from the map, and the Plan Commission chose not to take that up. Staff request that you go forward with what you have in front of you tonight and let the process play out. This is zoning, and I believe Again, Commissioner Anderson, you hit it on the head earlier when you were talking about the text. There's always rezonings that have to happen. There's always variance relief valves. That is true whether you're natural features protection or just your simple setback standards that you're applying to a property, because properties are different. And so staff would like to request that you consider what is before you in its entirety. Let the process play out. We can work with rezonings, we can work with variance. We have heard time and time again over the last couple months that there are a lot of properties we need to add to this plan. And so we have that ability to add and subtract over time. And so I'm happy to make any other clarifications that you find necessary as you review.
Commissioner Cooney?
Thank you, Mayor. So you said that the frontage would be designated commercial, right? And then there was something about open space?
In the 1998 future land use plan,
Okay.
it split, it actually had the corner of Drake and Stadium as open space and the area closer to the apartments as commercial. That was the 1998 future land use designation.
So here's, could you explain this to me? This is an email that was sent on September the 28th, 2017, to Mr. Calendar and Mr. Tarani. All three parcels are designated commercial on the future land development map.
That's correct. The 2017 future land development map, using the parcels that don't exist now, but using those parcels that did exist, designated all three of those as commercial.
So what would Mr. Tarani think of that? When you say that to him, what's he thinking? That some of it I won't be able to use?
I think that when someone calls and asks us questions about the future land use plan, we let them know what is the appropriate commercial what the appropriate designation is. In this case, it's generally commercial. We have 4 commercial zoning districts of various intensities, all of which would have been applicable on this property. In addition, for this property specifically, we did talk about this property having more than one context. Context was something we talked about quite a bit during the 2025 master plan and Imagine Kalamazoo, between corridors and neighborhoods and busy streets and residential streets and open space. And so I'm happy to provide you with all the emails that I had that went back and forth on these sets of properties. Always talked about the fact that there's also natural features protection, which was going to guide how the property got developed. Not with what, but how.
Commissioner Urban?
Thank you, Mayor. I have some understandings that I'm going to try out on you, and if they're wrong in a substantive way, please correct me, because it's going to help me clarify how I'm going to act on this. On the other hand, if it's just a bad use of words, we'll say that too, and then we'll just go on. Well, first of all, regarding master plans, my understanding is that yes, they are aspirational, but two, the expectation is that the master plans will be followed. I mean, why have a plan if you don't intend to follow it? On the other hand, master plans are put into effect for some numbers of years, and meanwhile, in those years between actually creating plans, planning is going on, and adjustments are being made, taking advantage of new information or new situations that arise. I mean, that's just how any battlefield commander or anybody would respond to a set of conditions involving operation or effectuation of a plan. So, have I said anything wrong so far?
No.
Okay. The next thing I wanted to I want to try out my understanding with you on is the fact that that property is parts of that property along Stadium Drive are shown to be designated commercial in the master plan. It's really pretty readily understandable given how much of Stadium Drive already is commercial, that people could have an expectation that a commercial zone is something that could happen in the future. And this master plan shows that. There is a commercial zoning designation shown in the plan, not in the zoning ordinance. This is just talking about the plan now.
Correct.
Remember,
The
there's
future
a
land use
distinction
plan.
between the master plan and the existing ordinances which have the force of law. The master plan does not have the force of law. Is that correct?
They are definitely two different documents.
Okay, that's the
Definitely two
main
different
thing.
documents. The future land use plan talks about what the appropriate, sets the vision for the community and talks about what the appropriate land uses were if the property were to change. It
Okay.
does not change the existing zoning. If someone wanted to develop the property today as single-family residential, that is what it's zoned for. They would have that right.
Okay.
Even though the future land use plan recognizes stadium, the context of stadium as a commercial street.
Yes.
That said, there is a correlation between the vision that the future land use plan and the master plan set out and your zoning ordinance. But you are correct that one is written overlooking the whole city, and I always say this, that 30,000-foot up view versus on the ground.
Okay. So let me just follow up a little bit more. Right now, that property is zoned residential.
Correct.
And the master plan says that in future, it is perfectly appropriate for it to become commercial. For it to become commercial, it has to be recommended or brought to the Planning Commission, where it gets a thorough review, and however many meetings you need to have even before that, plus the Planning Commission meeting, before it could come to us to actually change that property zone from residential to commercial.
Correct.
Is there anything in the NFP overlay ordinance that prohibits that property on Stadium Drive from becoming rezoned commercial if it went through the appropriate steps that are given in the ordinance?
Right. The answer is no, because what the text you just passed was designed looking at the entire community. And it was written based on the features that exist in the community and not necessarily based on the use of the lot. There can be the same stand of trees can exist whether the property is commercial, industrial, or residential.
Okay.
So it was written without reconsidering the underlying land use designation.
Okay. Now, I think I'm getting close to the end of what I want to ask about. The goal, as I understand it, in this NFP ordinance was to not prohibit development, but to promote more thoughtful development. Now, it seems to me, I'm offering this to everybody, it seems to me that it is possible to have thoughtful development of that former Vermeulen property. All three parcels, which I tend to consider as one piece of property, but legally, according to the Register of Deeds, there's 3 parcels there, recently reconfigured to escape some strictures. But it seems to me that it's perfectly feasible, though not easy, to have that property be developed into, for example, a planned unit development with some commercial aspects along Stadium Drive, and the rest of it being pretty much conforming to the natural rise and fall of the terrain and the natural clumping of trees and so forth in the property, so that it looks something like, well, the model that people use locally is Parkview Hills. Now, here we're talking about 17 acres. It's not trivial, but it's smaller than Parkview Hills. And it seems to me possible for the owner to develop it, even to that extent, and still be in conformance with with ordinances that can be created or are already in existence for the city.
That was the intention of creating the ordinance. And so we started every meeting by giving 4 principles, of which the first, of our work, of the first one, which the first one was that it was about more thoughtful development, that the goal was not to prevent development. The goal was not no development, it was how to do it more thoughtfully.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments? Commissioner Anderson? Microphone. Microphone.
Thank you. A couple of things for terminology clarification. Master plan versus future land use plan.
Sure. So the future land use plan is an exhibit within the master plan. They both set forth a vision. They both look at the community over whatever the lifespan of the master plan is. They are not separate entities. They are part of it. Remember, master plans primarily focus on land use and transportation. We have a future land use plan, and we have we also refer to it as the future development plan because we really thought about streets and their context as well as the context of the land use adjacent to it.
And how often do we refresh the master plan and all its subcomponents then?
So the state requires us to do it every 10 years. It had a check-in at 5. And if you recall, the last master plan was 2010. And at the 5-year check-in, it no longer met with the community's vision, and so it was updated. It is also possible to view the master plan not as a completely static document between those 5 and 10 years. If something needs to be adjusted, whether it's the map or a goal because we have more information or scenarios have changed, there's no reason why you can't go through the process and amend your master plan within its life cycle.
That said, if the state is expecting that we have a master plan and its subcomponents, are there some prescriptions about how a political entity develops that master plan? Or, I mean, do you...
the state says you have to have one public hearing, it has to go to the Plan Commission. It is very safe to say that whatever we did for Imagine Kalamazoo went well beyond what the state would require us to do.
So even though we had a process we described as Imagine Kalamazoo, which included a whole bunch of things, in many ways that was parallel to collecting the information, the input we needed to update our master plan.
We use that information to create our strategic vision. We use that information to update our master plan, and we are still using it with some level of going out and confirming, like we did for the zoning update, like Parks and Rec recently did, like all the neighborhood plans. And because we collected information that did go beyond what was in a master plan, details that were far more specific.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So one purpose of a master plan is so that you have a plan. And so that every single thing that happens in town, you're not just figuring out how does this fit into anything else, and everybody decides whatever that is. I mean, I know we've got plans that drive a whole variety of things. Some things that turn into ordinances are part of that. So is there, if you had to describe in short form, once again, the connection between master plan and zoning, I mean, is there any legal connection there? I don't know if this is a question for the attorney maybe. What is that interaction between zoning code and master plan?
The zoning code should reflect what's in the master plan. I mean, we have set that the ideal scenario is that you create your community vision, and then you create a code to support that vision. Now, we last updated our master plan in 2010. Our last zoning code was updated in 2005. And before that, it was well before, I think in the 70s. I think we're partway through updating our 4th version of our zoning code. So it doesn't always happen completely in sync, but that's the goal. And so that's what we have been trying to do. You know, we started last fall with the north side. You know, we have started with this process. You know, our goal is not to be always reactionary with our zoning, but to be more thoughtful with what we are putting down and how we're doing it throughout the community.
just a couple other things here. So remind me, and I am, for my ignorance on this particular topic, I apologize, but is there a process, I know there's a process for inclusion, is there a process for exemption as it relates to the NFP overlay?
Clyde can correct me, but it is a zoning district, and it's applied, an overlay district is applied the same way or removed in the same way that any other district is.
Well, a couple things. And Ms. Anderson is right. Your first question a couple minutes ago, the state law provides that a zoning ordinance shall be based upon a master plan. So that's the connection. The ordinance shall be based upon the master plan. As far as inclusion and exclusion, again, Ms. Anderson is correct that there are, once it is applied, like any zoning ordinance, whether you want to rezone or change the boundary of a zone, that follows the same process as it would be if you decide to rezone a parcel from one commercial to maybe a separate type of commercial zone or something completely different. So those processes would be the same in either case.
Split zoning question. So I understand we have it in our own local ordinance relative to split zoning. We don't split zone a parcel. It's also considered best practice as it becomes. So I can see, we've got kind of a unique situation here is that we're just laying this thing out, and it's not like it's been around for a long time and everyone's known the rules, and so you come and work with that. So there are people that are in and out as far as that goes. And when it comes back to the split zoning best practice, I mean, not to be hyperbolic about it, but I suppose you could have a 20-acre parcel that has 20 feet in one corner that have a natural feature on it, which to not split zone throws the entire parcel into an NFP property. I mean, that's the way it is now, correct? Because we're not going to split zone. So we have this interesting situation now where we now have a couple parcels that are actually not, as far as we can tell, I don't know about the survey, exactly in our natural features protection. They are adjacent to, presumably, but isn't that something that could happen at any time in the future? Is that someone could say, hey, coming in, the whole thing's covered by this, but since it's just in one corner, I'm going to create a new parcel, and now the rest of it's not in that. I mean, isn't that something we're going to have to kind of address going forward?
They would have to go through the rezoning process once it is mapped. Now, if you have a property that has the overlay on it and your feature that's on your property happens to just be at the corner, then you would deal with that feature. So say part of a woodland ran on one corner of your property. So what do you do when you have a woodland? You figure out the edge trees. You take the critical root zone, which is a distance that is created based on the diameter of the trunk of the tree. You extend that out because you think about where the roots of the tree are. You want to make sure that you're protecting those during construction. Damage the roots, you damage the tree. So in that scenario, you would take the woodland, figure out the critical root zone for all the trees on the edge. That becomes your setback for the woodland.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other comments? Mr. Attorney?
I might also point out that if somebody decides to carve out a corner of their parcel, you still must carve out a lot that conforms with our lot requirements. So you couldn't just carve out a small little thing that you could never use. So any carve out would have to be consistent with our lot requirements.
Other questions? Thank you, Madam Planner. Commissioners, I've been pretty quiet tonight. I served on the Planning Commission 6 years, Zoning Board of Appeals. I have a clear understanding there's a difference between master plan and zoning. This has happened over and over and over in the years of our city. There's still opportunity. There's a phase 2. There's plenty of opportunity to determine what happens for someone, so I will be supporting this. Are there any other comments? Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is a very difficult and complex issue, and I've agonized over this. I walked out there today. This is a beautiful property, a beautiful property. And if we were starting today, what I would hope would be that we would preserve it just as it is. And I think that's what the community would like to see, that we preserve it just as it is. Unfortunately, we're far down the line from that. Decisions have been made years ago, a couple years ago, about this. So I'd like to see if we could find a way to preserve this whole area. That's one piece. Second piece is, I believe that Mr. Tirani had good reason to believe that he could develop that whole property, that the two parcels, he could develop them with the regular rules that we have for development of property, but that he would have to have special rules for that third parcel. I believe that he had very good reason to believe that, and he's put a lot of money into that. So I don't think it's just right that we should just walk away from him and say, that was a shame, you made a mistake there, good luck. No, I think we have to make him whole. Now, I'm not sure exactly how to do that, but I would propose this. I think the city should buy him out. I think we should buy that property. Keep him whole and preserve that property as we want it to be preserved. That's what so I can't support including him in this layout. That's just what I think should happen.
Commissioner Urban.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Well, it seems that we're going to end up revolving around some detail of how these parcels were divided, because at the time the four drafts were being prepared, there was a split zone situation because of the way the parcels are shown on the in the Register of Deeds office and on our GSI mapping of the city. At the just before the Planning Commission met, the owner and his team went to the Register of Deeds and rearranged the boundaries of the parcels so that most of the land that he had bought would be outside of what his team thought should be the natural features protection zone. So that's a clever strategy. I think if I were he, I would do the same thing. But I'm looking at it from a little bit more distant and more long-reaching viewpoint. Is are we about to do something that's going to be irreparable in terms of how that land is functioning in our environment to satisfy the desires of an owner who happens to have bought this property for a specific use, and in my opinion may have found out subsequently that this is not the most ideal property for the purpose he originally thought. But there are many other uses for that property that he's free to develop on. And so I don't feel I'm, in my vote, going to be restricting his right to earn a living from that property or for getting a return from on his investment. All of us, everybody who is an architect or a landscape architect or a surveyor or whatever, works with constraints. And those constraints start out being the thing that you start with. Those are what you work with. And creative people find ways to work in constraints. And in fact, when there's no constraints, I maintain there's no creativity. So I'm getting a little wound up on this. Maybe I'm starting to channel Shannon a little bit, but I think that at the conceptual level, there's every reason to include the whole former Vermeulen property in the NFP zone. If you go out there, you can't see where those little boundaries are that are on the maps that have been shown to us. The animals and all the creatures, including me, who happen to have been looking for my lost dog there, can notice where those boundaries are. It's all of a piece, and I'd like us to consider it as all of a piece.
Any other comments? Commissioner?
So I'm in complete agreement in regards to, in regards to some of your comments, Commissioner Cooney, in that, you know, it sounds like there's been some miscommunication. And there's a lot of things to take in consideration. I think as a community, we have to be intentional on taking care of our environment, hands down, period, no questions asked. That has to be a primary goal. I think, you know, what are we balancing here? How can we be firm, fair, consistent? So I guess my thoughts kind of go back to, you know, what was the initial conversation? I would have liked for the Planning Commission to have a little more dialogue in regards to the changing in the deeds, as Commissioner Urban mentioned. But unfortunately, now it's fallen into our ability to make a decision. I understand that there are pressure relief valves that are in place to, you know, give Mr. Tarani or anyone the ability to effectively respond to hardships of developing a land use. But I think at this place and this time, I think this is our opportunity to act in that role and act in that capacity. Now, what does that look like? I can't say that I completely agree in regards to us buying out the land, but as is, I think, you know, I think when we reflected on this a few months ago and provided the moratorium, it was for us to effectively have more time to, you know, to come to a better conclusion. There's been some response in that process, or some variables that have changed, such as the land deed being switched, and so now we have 3 different parcels, 2 of which do not fall into the category of the original NFP overlay. And I just, you know, as much as I do not completely agree, I completely agree. I do not want it to be developed into a space of a car wash. I think of the land use that is next to it, which is Stadium Drive Apartments, where, you know, my sister lived at one point in time, affordable housing, and I know the beauty surrounding that space and having access to that space. So there's a lot of things to take in consideration, even some parts that haven't been mentioned tonight, but I am in complete agreement, as is. I will not be voting for it, and at least you provided an alternative, and I'm not sure that I will be able to support that item.
Clerk Boiling, roll call, please.
So I'm going to ask the attorney something here. So just keep it in mind that now that there's 6 of us, not 7, you know, a 3-3 would be a fail on this map. On the other hand, this map is, you know, part and parcel with the first thing that we took action on. And so, you know, what are we doing if, for example, if there were 3 people to vote against this and 3-4, it's a fail, and then there we are. So, and I know this is probably impossible to answer at this moment, but is there a way for, you know, if this fails, in a way it holds up maybe a bunch of other stuff that might be going on that we are trying to accomplish, you know, by getting this map in place? Other developments are also covered by this. Is there a way to, you know, set aside this very modest portion just tonight and go ahead and prove the rest of the map, to set a small portion of this map aside, you know, approve that, because some of the concerns seem to be, I'm asking a question, I see head shaking, so it's just a way to do that. I don't know if that's a question for the city attorney or not, or somebody else.
So, you know, Commissioner, I guess, certainly the city attorney, I'll call him, you know, we have 6 members. It's before us. We're not going to have a seventh member probably for another one, I don't know how many days. And that seventh member will have to become very versed on this subject.
I'm not saying waiting for
no,
that.
I let you go. Yeah, you could have a 3-3 and it fails. And yep, it fails. To me, this is not tonight, for me, it's not about that parcel. It's to me about land use and what is or is not. And if we're going to single out that parcel, I think we're wandering into a space that's challenging. Then, I just think it's challenging. So if we want to pull that out, I guess I'm not supportive of that. I am supportive of us having the vote, and the vote lands where it may. And unfortunately, with everything else we do, sometimes the day wins and sometimes the day doesn't. But if we start pulling out, then when do we do that the next time? It's like, I'm challenged by that, Commissioner. Or, Mr. Attorney, though, I think you should answer the Commissioner's question.
I want to make sure I understand the Commissioner's question as to, are you asking what happens if, I guess I perceive two questions. Number one, what happens if, for instance, there's a 3-3 vote and this proposed ordinance is not approved tonight? That's question one. Question two, is there a way to, I guess, salvage that situation? Do I understand it correctly? Sure. So in regard to the first question, yes, if it's a 3-3 vote, you don't pass it. So what you've done is we've got a text, but we haven't applied it to any properties across the city, which means also that the moratorium on things is going to expire June 3rd. So what you would have is a zoning ordinance not applied to any properties, and owners of those properties would be able to proceed with development of their properties without any NFP requirements on them. So that's answer your question to number one. Number two, yeah, there are a couple of things you can do. You can certainly act on the request that was made and exempt those two properties and just move on from there. Another approach would be to adopt the ordinance as drafted and ask that those properties that you have some concern about go back to the Planning Commission for reconsideration and maybe a new recommendation to perhaps remove them in another action by the City Commission. And by that option would obviously, if you adopted it, would put the ordinance in place, and you would be giving the property owner another bite at the apple before the Planning Commission.
Yeah, good idea.
Commissioner?
Thank you, Mayor. Another option here, as I understand it, is available to anybody who finds himself suffering a hardship on account of zoning, whether it's one of the basic zones or whether it's an overlay zone, which is what we're talking about here. It's possible to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals, saying I have an undue hardship in this case because of features of the land, which the land features are challenging, and ask for the Zoning Board of Appeals to rule on that specific property. The neat thing about the Zoning Board of Appeals is it doesn't set precedent for everything else. It looks at the particular property and the conditions there and is perfectly capable and charged with making determinations based on that specific situation. If the ruling of the Zoning Board of Appeals is not in favor of the person who brought the appeal, that entity can then proceed to go to the circuit court. So there is a relief valve besides amending this ordinance, or simply just letting it lapse. And the other one is to approve the ordinance as read to us, the map as read to us, and with the suggestion that if there are objections to specifics, that the variance vehicle involving the zoning board of appeals could be used.
Commissioner Cooney?
I would like to offer a substitute motion, as the city attorney had presented it, his third one, that we rezone properties throughout the city with the Natural Features Protection Overlay District, with the exception of these two properties. And they go back to the Planning Commission. And that would give us time to see if people are interested in raising money and buying back the property and keeping it intact.
We have a motion on the floor? Is there support? Motion fails. Commissioner Cooney made a motion. I thought we were all here.
Okay.
Commissioner Anderson?
For the process of keeping this going, I'll support that.
Well, you're going to have to make the motion again because it failed. You did not support it when requested.
Okay, make it again? Okay, so I propose that we rezone, I'm going to read the ordinance here. We rezone properties throughout the city with the Natural Features Protection Overlay District, except for these two properties, which we send back to the Planning Commission for further discussion. And that will give us some time to think about this.
We have a motion by Commissioner Cooney. Support? Supported by Commissioner Anderson. We are discussing the motion. We're not discussing the previous motion.
So
we're in discussion mode. Commissioner?
I'm ready to discuss this new motion.
Go ahead.
I just want to ask us to consider what we expect to learn from going back to the Plan Commission. They've heard everything that has been said tonight. They have already heard. There's very little new information that they haven't already been made aware of. We have to be sure that the moratorium is not extended with whatever we do. And I'm not going to vote for this motion if there's any chance that the moratorium is going to be extended. I think putting it back to the Plan Commission is a way for some of us to kind of kick the can down the road, frankly, and I'm not in favor of that. But it's not the end of the world if it goes back to the Plan Commission. There is another day, and we'll have some more hearings and some more discussion and some more heat and maybe not a lot of light. But we can always hope for light, and maybe it's worth trying to seek it.
Commissioner Anderson?
Defer to Commissioner Cunningham.
Commissioner Cunningham?
Attorney Robinson, can you give some clarity on the moratorium if we move this amended motion forward?
Certainly. And I don't know if I got the words of Commissioner Cooney matched his intent, but to answer your question, the moratorium expires on June the 3rd. The concern, pardon?
Would we have to extend it?
Could extend it. The problem becomes, what are you extending as to what parcels? And the way Commissioner Cooney worded his motion, as I understood it, he would exempt the two properties from the overlay zone. The overlay zone would go into effect except as to do those two properties, which would, and the zoning, the moratorium would expire, meaning that those two properties would be open to development while the Planning Commission is trying to figure out whether they should be included at a later date. I don't know that I would not advocate doing that, because you create, if you will, kind of a hole in the process. You open it up, then it would potentially be closed in the future. And so I don't recommend that approach.
So, Mr. Mayor, I would withdraw that motion because I didn't understand that they could develop in the meantime. I withdraw my motion.
Is the support withdrawn?
Yes.
Okay. So we're now still in discussion on the previous motion. Is there further discussion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Knott.
Yes.
Mayor Hopewell.
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney.
No.
Commissioner Cunningham.
No.
Thank you, Commission. Motion passes. Next item is the consent agenda, Mr. Manager.
We have 19 items on the consent this evening. First is the approval of the purchase of annual licenses for Microsoft Office.
I'm going to ask everyone exiting to exit quietly. We have a significant agenda to try to get through, so please exit quietly. The folks that are speaking in the back, please exit and have your conversations in the hall. Thank you. Mr. Manager?
Annual licenses for Microsoft Office 365 from CDWG through the MyDeal Cooperative Purchasing Program in the amount of $100,578. Next is the approval of a 2-year contract extension with Wayne County Appraisal, LLC, doing business as WCA Assessing, to provide city assessor of record services through May 31st, 2021, in the amount of $216,156, and the appointment of Aaron Powers as city assessor under the provisions of Charter Section 51, effective June 1, 2019. Next is the approval of the purchase of 3 International HV 613 SBA truck chassis from West Michigan International through the National Joint Power Alliance Cooperative Purchasing Program in the amount of $393,159.20. Next is the approval of a contract with Consumers Concrete for ready-mix concrete in the amount of $405,600. Next is the approval of a 2-year contract extension with Wayne County Appraisal, LLC, doing business as WCA Assessing for assessing services including field inspections, data entry, and small claims tax tribunal appeals in the amount of $602,563. Next is the approval of a contract with J. Rank for Station 11, 24, and 25 upgrades in the amount of $1,498,245 and appropriate an additional $779,100 from bond proceeds or working capital. Next is the approval of a 3-year contract with Arrowhead Realty Corporation for National Science Foundation certified lead removal water filters in the amount of $787,200. Next is the approval of a contract with SWT Excavating for the 2019 lead services replacement project in the amount of $2,504,626.72 and the appropriation of an additional $482,226.72 from bond proceeds or working capital. Next is the first reading of an ordinance repealing sections 23-3 through 22-5 of the Kalamazoo City Code, which were replaced by recent amendments to Chapter 21 nuisances. Next is the first reading of an ordinance repealing Section 22-53, loitering, and Section 22-56, loitering in places where controlled substances or drug paraphernalia are sold, dispensed, of the City Code of Ordinances. Next is the first reading of an ordinance to amend Section 22-41 of the Kalamazoo City Code regarding drug paraphernalia. Next is the approval of a resolution confirming the 2019 assessment roll. Next is the adoption of a resolution approving the request of the Downtown Development Authority to levy a tax rate of 1.9638 mils. Next is the adoption of a corrected resolution recommending approval of the application of DT Water Street, LLC, Water Street Coffee Joint for a new Class C license issued under MCL 436.1521 subsection A1B to be located at 315 East Water Street within the Downtown Development District and rescind Resolution 19-07 adopted on February 4, 2019. Next is the approval of a license agreement with the City of Kalamazoo and the Kalamazoo Promise to install the Kalamazoo Promises logo on the new water tank adjacent to US 131. Next is the approval of a request from the Kalamazoo Country Club for a permit to publicly display fireworks at 1609 Whites Road on Thursday, July 24, 2019, with the rain date of Friday, June 5th. Next is the approval of a request from Western Michigan University to publicly display fireworks at Himes Field on Saturday, September 14, 2019. And then we have approval of the mayor's appointment and reappointments to boards and commissions. First, the appointment of Carla Reganis to the Historic Preservation Commission for a term expiring on March 31, 2022. The reappointment of Derek Wisner to the Planning Commission for a term expiring on March 31, 2022. And the reappointment of Greg Milliken to the Planning Commission for a term expiring on March 31, 2022. And finally, the approval of the appointment of Kevin Weller to the Environmental Concerns Committee for a term expiring on January 1, 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Commissioners, the requested action is a motion to approve the consent agenda and authorize the city manager to sign all documents on behalf of the city. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Vice Mayor Knott, supported by Commissioner Anderson. Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Knott.
Yes.
Mayor Hopewell.
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney.
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. Motion carried. Real quick, before we go to the regular agenda, I thought you might want to see the logo that will go on the tower on off of West Michigan for the Kalamazoo Promise.
Oh, nice.
So
Nice.
this is our way of recognizing the promise and celebrating our city, and I think it's pretty awesome. So,
The water tower will look different, but
yeah, that's not our water tower, so sorry, Mr. Director, I know you're going to have chest pain. That's not what it looks like, but we had to give you a mock-up of what it would look like. The regular agenda, please, Mr. Mayor.
G1, adoption of an ordinance to amend Chapter 2, Article 10, Employee Retirement System, Section 2-224, Definitions.
Anyone wanting to comment on G1, please step to the podium. You'll have 4 minutes. Give us your name and whether you live within our city. Hearing seeing no one, Commissioners, the requested action is a motion to adopt the ordinance. Is there a motion? Moved by Vice Mayor Knott.
Support.
Supported by Commissioner Cooney. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mayor Hopewell.
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney.
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Knott.
Thank you, Commissioners. Motion carried. Mr. Manager, G2.
Adoption of an ordinance to terminate the amended restated development plan and tax increment financing plan for the City of Kalamazoo Downtown Development Authority and to repeal the following ordinances: 1450, 1457, 1468, 1492, 1523, 1643, 1817, and a portion of ordinance 1679.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Anyone in the audience wanting to comment on G2, please step to the podium. You'll have 4 minutes. Name and whether you live within the city. Seeing no one, the requested action is a motion to adopt the ordinance. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Cooney, supported by Commissioner Anderson. Discussion? Roll call?
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney.
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Knott.
Yes.
Mayor Hopewell.
Yes. Thank you, Commissioners. Motion carried. G3, Mr. Manager?
Adoption of an ordinance authorizing the issuance of wastewater supply system revenue bonds, Series 2019, for an amount not to exceed $10 million, and adoption of a notice of sale resolution.
Anyone wanting to comment on this item, please step forward. You'll have 4 minutes, and we will need your name and whether you live within the city. Seeing no one, Commissioners, the requested action is a motion to adopt the ordinance and resolution. Is there a motion?
I so move.
Moved by Commissioner Urban. Supported by Vice Mayor. Discussion? Roll call?
Commissioner Cooney.
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Knott.
Yes.
Mayor Hopewell.
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. G4?
Adoption of an ordinance authorizing the issuance of water supply system revenue bonds, Series 2019, for an amount not to exceed $11,200,000, and adoption of a notice of sale resolution.
Anyone in the audience wanting to comment on G4, please step forward. You'll have 4 minutes. Give us your name and whether you live within our city. Seeing no one, Commissioners' requested action is a motion to adopt the ordinance and resolution. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner
Support.
Cooney, supported by Commissioner Urban. Discussion? Roll call?
Commissioner Cunningham.
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Knott.
Yes.
Mayor Hopewell.
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. Motion carried. G5.
Adoption of a resolution for the issuance of general obligation limited tax bonds for an amount not to exceed $10.5 million for the purpose of financing fiscal year 2019 capital projects.
Anyone in the audience wanting to comment on G5, please step forward. You'll have 4 minutes. Give us your name and whether you live within our city. Seeing no one, Commissioners' requested action is a motion to adopt the resolution. Is there a motion? Moved by Vice Mayor,
Support.
supported by Commissioner Anderson. Discussion? Roll call?
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Knott.
Yes.
Mayor Hopewell.
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney.
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. Motion carried. Mr. Manager, you have a report this evening?
Not tonight, Your Honor.
Mr. Attorney?
Indeed, I do. And I got 3 things I'd like to bring to the Commission's attention. The first is, this is a shout out to a classmate of mine who I attended class at South Junior High, and we graduated from Kalamazoo Central together, on the retirement of United States Magistrate Judge Timothy Greeley. He's with the Western District of Federal Court. His magistrate court was in Marquette, Michigan, and he retired today. And so a shout out to a classmate of mine on his retirement. Wish him all the best. The other thing is a report on the Amnesty Day that took place on Friday of last week. There were 171 individuals who came to court, and they resolved 251 warrants. Various jurisdictions were impacted: the city, the county, Portage, and Kalamazoo Township. Out of those 171 individuals, 35 were city cases. The rest of them were other jurisdictions, the lion's share being the county. That's a little more than what last year. Last year, there was 183 people showed up, but only 153 actually went to court. I would like to echo first thank my staff. They, Marcia Jones, Richard Cherry, and Sarah Wanslick rotated through, so one person wasn't stuck all afternoon in court. They rotated out throughout the afternoon. And in addition to getting warrants taken care of, there was a tent set up in Bronson Park so people could get other social services and employment assistance. And so, again, there was Michigan Works, Community Mental Health, and other agencies were available. And so I would like to echo the words of Judge Henneke, who's the chief judge of the district court. He said, "I'm so proud of our partners in the community who joined together to pull off such an event. One more reason to love Kalamazoo." And I echo those words. The final thing is just a reminder. The last city commission meeting, the city commission approved the new fireworks law that was adopted by the state. So this is the first weekend of the summer where people can discharge fireworks. But, it being Memorial Day weekend, they are permitted to be discharged from 11 a.m. to 11:45 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday only, not on Memorial Day, because people got to go to work the next day. So, and if you discharge fireworks after hours, it's a $1,000 fine. And that was an increase that the legislature approved. So enjoy your fireworks on Saturday and Sunday, but not Monday. So thank you, Mayor, for the opportunity to address those matters.
Absolutely. Mr. Clerk?
I just want to mention that nomination packets are available in my office for people who want to run for mayor or city commission.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Any questions for the staff? All right, I will say one thing. I want to thank Public Safety, too, for Amnesty Day. They were very much supporters of that and helped make that happen, and so we appreciate their good work. J1, filling of a vacancy on the City Commission. We gave you some thinking around the process at the last meeting. Tonight, I guess I'm wanting to hear your thoughts if we're going to move forward with that process. Also tonight, if we are going to move forward with that process, we need to select an interview date. and maybe a time to limit applications coming in so we can get to that interview date. And knowing that we have a holiday coming up and a couple other things, and a reminder to all of you and the city, the citizens that are out there, we have to fill this vacancy within 30 days of today. So, anyway, Commissioner Urban, I see you reaching.
Well, the hand moves faster than the mind in this instance. Well, I think that we should have the final people ready to be interviewed by the middle of June, right? About. So let's back up from that. When would we need to close the application period so that we all would have enough time to review the applications? Let's just think about that.
Yeah, good point. How long did we keep them open the last time? Do you remember, Mr. Clerk?
I think the last time we did this, which that process started in December of 2014, ended in January of 2015. What we looked at was at one meeting, there was this discussion about how do we proceed with the application process, and the idea was we'll have this open application period. It was only about a week or so, I'm thinking, and then the idea was at the next meeting, commissioners wanted the applications to be in the agenda packet so that there could be a discussion of, okay, where do we go from here? Let's see how many applicants we have. So if we followed that process, we'd have an application period now for about a week, so then the applications could be in the agenda packet for the June 3rd meeting.
And we did announce, that anyone could start applying as well. Have you received any applications?
I've received one application, and I know I've sent it out to the applications out to people.
That have requested?
Yeah.
It's just it's the board application, our standard board and commission or board application. Yeah, well, right now, they've received the applications, you can put it in. We haven't said that they have to write a letter, but if we follow the process, they will have to turn in a letter before their application is considered. That's a part of the application packet, I guess I'd say.
So what about if they have to have the application in June 3rd and we have the hearing on June 10th? That would be a special meeting. You want to do it at a regular meeting or at a special meeting?
I myself I'm thinking we're going to have to call a special. I don't know how we're going to get all this done without.
So that's what I think. That's what the 10th is not, we got a meeting on 3rd, we don't have one on the 10th.
Is that?
I'm okay with that.
So application deadline is by June 3rd. We'll plan a special, I didn't check. I guess I should check to see where I am on the 10th. I'm here, so. That's true, it doesn't have to be on Monday, but does the 10th work for everyone? You have your calendars so far?
Yeah, I'll make myself be there.
Commissioner Cunningham?
6?
So we'll go to, on the 10th, and can we do 6 o'clock?
Yes.
Okay, we'll hold it at 6 o'clock. And
If I may, what do you anticipate doing on the 10th?
we're still in discussion about what we're doing on the 10th.
Okay, I just was a little unclear.
Yeah, we're not done. Thank you, though. So applications will close. I guess I'm being a little ornery today. I'm sorry, but I'm like, can we get there? Applications will close on the 3rd. On the 10th will be our intent to, we'll have reviewed applications, and we will interview folks on that night. Is that the plan?
Well, what we did the other time.
Or what was, I'm sorry, I guess I should look at this. Deadline of, okay, at the regular business meeting of the City Commission adopted a resolution accepting the resignation, blah, 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 blah.
I don't know if I got it there. Maybe I gave you the wrong thing for a second. What we did the last time, we submitted a question. Each of us submitted a question, and then that night, we asked them to respond to the question.
And we interviewed all the comers, do you remember?
Yes. Well, no.
Oh, I thought we narrowed it down.
what you did before is the applications were due on a Friday, and the following Monday, at a regular meeting, you narrowed the scope of the field, and then you interviewed them the subsequent special meeting. So that's why I asked, what do you plan on doing on the 10th? If it's just to, I suppose if only 3 people apply, your job is pretty easy, but if a dozen people apply, do you really want to interview a dozen people? So that's what I was trying to get at.
No, we want to, so the way, I don't know, did I give you the whole thing? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
I think we voted, and if anybody got 2 votes, they came to the,
correct, but we didn't do that. We did that the Friday after the applications were due in, is that what you're saying?
Right, you did it the following, they were due on a Friday, and then you made the decision to reduce the field on that following
On
Monday.
that following Monday. So if we did the same thing, you're saying the 10th would be when we narrow the field?
No, I was suggesting you do it on, like, what is whatever the first Monday.
right.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, so they would be due on Friday. That, a week from Friday? Okay, a week from Friday.
If I could make a suggestion, based on the agenda schedule, if you're going to narrow the field on June 3rd, you're going to want to have those applications beforehand so you can be reviewing those. I would recommend that the deadline be a week from Thursday, whatever that would be, because that's when the agenda packet goes out. And we could include the applications in the agenda packet, so they're out there for commissioners, the public to see. Then on Monday the 3rd, you can make the decision. If you only get 4 applicants, well, you know, that changes it as opposed to if you get 20, right? So then you can have the discussion, do we want to narrow it, how do we do that, and so on the 3rd. Then you're prepared to go forward with interviews on the 10th.
So apparently I should have just let you and the attorney just tell us what we need to do. Okay. So if it's okay with the commission, we'll follow the guidance of the clerk and the attorney. We'll be prepared to narrow the field on the 3rd, right? Using the same process that we used the last time to narrow the field, to have interviews of those that will move forward on the 10th. I see a lot of nods of heads. Commissioner, I'm not seeing, thank you.
Could I ask a question?
Except that just screwed something up,
No,
so.
I just want to make sure that you make it clear what the deadline is. It's going to be May the 30th at 5 o'clock is when the
5 p.m.
applications have to be into the city clerk.
Correct.
So that doesn't mean dropping it in the mail and it gets there the next day. It has
Right.
to
Into the city
be
clerk.
received by the clerk by
I have
5
to have it.
o'clock on the 30th.
And then they give them to us? Because we're going to have to read them over.
Yes.
And then the following
Right.
Monday, we vote on who's going to be the finalists. Okay.
Yes.
A quick question. Now, we can decide at our meeting on the 10th
Yeah.
after the interviews?
We need to,
We
I
need
mean,
to.
we
That's
we
it.
don't have
That
to.
will
We
be our
still have a
last-
little time, but, yeah.
Rather than putting it off to our next regular meeting, which would be
17th.
17th.
Yeah.
Well, you
You,
have 30 days.
you could do it the 17th if there's a problem with the 10th. I mean, the goal is to decide on the 10th. But
Okay.
if something happens where we can't decide, which, yeah, you never know right now, we can do it on the 17th.
Good.
I mean, we got enough guidance? Everybody got it? Okay, good. We're now at citizens' comments on anything this evening. Please step forward. If you have anything this evening, you have 4 minutes. Give us your name and whether you live within the city, and this is sometimes how it works. So, sometimes it's how it works. Good evening.
Hello. It's been a long day for me. Couple things. Well,
Need your name and whether you live within the city,
I live in Eastwood.
and your name.
Antonia Kennedy.
Thank you.
Okay, you should start the thing. Anyway, this setup right here is really tough when you're sitting right there because you can't see the folks on this side. I don't know if anybody's ever mentioned that. The reason why I came was because I wanted to invite all of you personally to an event at Eastwood, August 24th, it's a Saturday, from 12 to 4. So anyway, I'm a neighbor. I'm not an agency or anything like that, but I decided that I didn't know who my elected officials were. I know that you're City of Kalamazoo. And I thought, wow, you can come ask me for a vote, but you can't come back and tell me that, wow, I got elected and this is why you want to come see me. So I got together a plan, talked to Township of Kalamazoo, and they know that I'm coming here to speak to you, out of respect, of course. And I'm having a party in my neighborhood, and I have all the city resources that I can get coming. As a matter of fact, today I got an email from Dr. Rice. Kalamazoo Public Schools are supporting. So I have eye exams, not ear exams. I have just different agency coming to come into the neighborhood, Eastwood, and talk to the families, let the family knows, hey, this agency, I do this is why you want to come see me. I'm also, as part of that, doing a food drive. So if you're an agency, this is free. I didn't charge anybody anything. You just got to bring a chair, a canopy, and a couple cans of food to put in a barrel so we can help fill up the shelves. The purpose is to meet our elected officials. Fred Upton is coming. It's on his schedule. The county commissioners are coming. The township commissioners are coming. I'm hoping, since it's your wonderful resources that you have within the city, that you would also like to stop in and say, hey, I'm Mayor Hopewell. Yes, I'm City of Kalamazoo, which I found out was East Side. I'm not the East Side. I'm Eastwood now. But you know what? It's a nice opportunity to bring everybody together, say hello, no speeches, no campaigning, just kind of hanging out with the neighborhood for 4 hours. It still gives you time to go somewhere else. We're having an ice cream social. I'm still working on the food and everything, but I got at least 35 agencies that are coming, all by myself. So I'm asking you to support me so that I don't have to be all by myself. And that's really it. So thank you. If you have any questions, my number's there. And thanks for your time and for the day.
Thank you.
Yep.
Next, please. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Jody Dozman. I live in the city of Kalamazoo. As far as I know, I've been born and raised here, so I'm not quite sure my future yet, but, I had this lawsuit, class action, from Michael Bowman for an unwanted telephone call. When I was talking to art bands, and by the end of that phone call, the way they badgered my credit card, and I had good credit at the time, I was still disappointed about the phone call and wished I had never answered it, and was definitely in the I don't want that phone call. So and I've been communicating about Stadium Drive Apartments and the management there. Well, what's unwanted is there was a guy, his name, okay, and he was walking down the hall with a double-edged blade taped to a pole. My apartment complex, I had my kitchen knives taken out of my butcher knives that I keep together, taken out of my silverware drawer, across the kitchen kitty corner into my bowl cupboard. I'm organized better than that, especially when I'm well settled. Judy doesn't put fences around the ponds. She didn't call about the hole in the fence. The papers ended up missing about the lady invading my home. Other things ended up missing. I'm just kind of the things between the things visible and the things that I don't have visible, like who entered my apartment and moved those knives, are issues. I mean, from what I understand from Mary Gilman and what the police had talked to her about, and she doesn't seem to be much of a liar, and I'm not sure about her exaggerating, but my phone book, my personal relative phone book was in the case where I had missed all my money 3 days in a row. And her sister ended up passing away, and from what I understand, her brother was killed or dead or something. And the terror going through my eyes, what happened with her granddaughter, is something I'm not sure the truth about. That would be something explored by other people. That hole in that fence back there, and there's ways that you can utilize that money to make that place safer and better. They didn't seem to comprehend anything. As far as the bank seeing, he was outside. There were 2 people out in the parking lot, me and this other lady coming in from church. And I had fecal matter in my toilet that I know I did not put in there. And it was a lot, and it was bad. So I'm not sure about the other lady and what she experienced, but to have your doors left open in the middle of the night while you're sleeping, experience stuff like that. She doesn't respond to the cameras and the doors being unlocked or invaded, so the cameras are definitely covering up criminal activity. There's other things going on, like I finally got this settlement for the class action to art vans. And I'm wondering how we would be able to do something to get all the letters together from everybody at Stadium Drive Apartments about what was going on there, because tampering is definitely an issue. I wasn't allowed, my lady, Judy, was going to subpoena my person that was standing up for me, and the other lady had to just, well, that's the halls, which my son's grandma's an issue, but not in the class action. And I don't know, I'm not quite sure how to go about.
Ma'am, your time's expired. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, and thank you. I know you've had quite a long night. I think we all have. And unfortunately, I'm here on the 11th hour for another subject that you've addressed in the past, and that is to save the Nazareth complex. I am Ann Zemlick. I do not live in the city, but I have been a Kalamazoo County resident all of my life. I've actually worked for the county as a nurse, as a community nurse. So I understand the needs of this community as it relates to those who have less than, or those who are more marginalized in this community and need some assistance. I'm very familiar with the grounds at Nazareth. Having worked for the county health department, I actually went there for 12 years every day to do my work. So I know the dorms well. While they need some major attention, they could still be functional. I'm aware that LISC had come in and looked at the dorms on that property, and while they don't feel those are as usable, I understand they have not looked at the mother house on that property. And that's a primary area that I would like you to concentrate on. That is a solid building. It was updated 10 years ago. It has updated fire suppression system, windows, and many more things have been updated. It's an immaculate building. This is a great community. I'm listening tonight about how we're invested and we value the history of this community. We value green space. I do too. I like to breathe oxygen and clean air. It's important. We also value our history and our heritage. I was talking to a young man who came in today because he saw the signs, Save Nazareth. And he was inspired. He said he moved here 7 years ago to this community. And he oftentimes will drive into the Nazareth complex because when he first arrived there, he noticed it and felt that it was a place of inspiration. Many people have gone there to feed their spirit, which we know is essential for us as human beings to be whole. So you've had a long night, so I'm going to read the rest of this because this is my call to action to you and something that I hope that you will pursue. We know the buildings are sound. We know they can be used. We are also aware that there are parties, nonprofit organizations who are still very interested in utilizing those buildings for the betterment of this community. We also know the need, especially for low-income housing, as well as sheltering, especially for our youth, unwed mothers, victims of domestic violence. What I'm asking you today is to consider, and I'm going to read this so I can get it to you succinctly. I'm asking for you for 1 year to delay the demolition while the Congregation of the Sisters of St. Joseph work with a community think tank. We're great at this in Kalamazoo. I know that they've worked with parties in the past, but I'm just wondering how extensive that has been. I'm asked that you help them put together a blue ribbon organization to work on this. I'm also asking that, if necessary, we request that the City Commission consider establishing, at their June 3rd meeting, establishing a resolution or on a moratorium on any work being done for at least 6 months and considering extending it to a year, with the exception of the necessary work that would have to be done to mothball this building, which would cost them nothing beyond that for maintenance, and give the Historical Preservation Commission some time to look at this again and thoroughly to establish this as a historical district. I thank you for your time and your attention and all of your hard work. You do an amazing job. It's incredible how much is thrown at you every day, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Good evening. Bringing up the rear, Pam O'Connor. I live in the city of Kalamazoo. Commissioners, last month, you directed your Historic Preservation Commission to stop the work you have charged it with doing. I chaired that commission twice. Those volunteers work in preservation and in similar occupations. They understand preservation's benefits, and because they make Kalamazoo a better place, they volunteer both their time and their expertise. That commission acted in accordance with its duty when it studied 2 potential local districts. Both had been areas of concern, one already a National Register district, the other determined eligible. Given those circumstances and our Imagine Kalamazoo plan, it was entirely appropriate. I'm very concerned that you stopped that work. In the process, there were multiple opportunities for information and public comment. Terminating your advisory board's well-informed work after several property owners complained causes me to wonder if you should be concerned about how you'll fill your advisory board seats in the future. Our historic district ordinance is very similar to the new natural features ordinance. Both are good civic planning efforts that allow us to fully appreciate, gain from, and put all of our extraordinary resources to work on our behalf. Both are green. It takes 10 to 80 years to make up the carbon unleashed during new construction, even when a new green building is 30% more efficient than the existing one. And an existing 50 square foot building has 80 billion BTUs of embodied energy, or the equivalent of 640,000 gallons of gasoline. Nazareth's planned demolition of about 400 square feet equals 640 billion BTUs of wasted energy and carbon, equal to over 5 million gallons of gasoline. Commissioners, if we want a sustainable community that protects our important historic, cultural, and national resources, we've got to flip the narrative. And you need to lead, not react. Instead of arguing to save old buildings and stands of heritage trees, we need to foster an expectation that they will remain. My quick check of Grand Rapids church habs this morning found new uses for 7 of them in the last 2 years, and I'm sure those buildings had challenges not unlike those cited in our vacant downtown churches. I don't know who told our friends at Nazareth that the Mother House could not be retrofitted, but the IHM sisters in Monroe did it while citing a similar commitment to sustainability. Using geothermal and other renewable systems, they reduced their gas use by 82% and their fresh water use by 80%, despite having 305 bathrooms, among other buildings. Preservation can almost always be accomplished, commissioners. It often does not cost more, and it always makes a greater contribution to our community. I hope you'll think about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Zachary Laster. I live in the city. Two things. The applications for the opening, are you guys going to be making those public, just out of transparency, before the meeting so others can read through them as well? Properly redacted, of course, you know, because phone numbers and stuff. And the other thing is I really want you guys to consider maybe appointing someone who will not run again. That way it is not used as a way to leapfrog themselves into office. With all due respect to you, Commissioner Cunningham, I like that. I like you. We all know that if someone ends up getting appointed, there's a significantly better chance of them actually getting elected. I mean, it's just the way it works. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wanting to address the commission this evening? Good evening.
Good evening. Excuse me. I was taking my dogs over to Woodward.
Can we have your name?
My name is Benjamin Stanley. I live in the city.
Thank you.
I was playing fetch with my dogs over at the school across the street from me, and these kids were like, I'm telling a story because I'm not sure how I can be involved in the community, and I'm trying to reach out. I've reached out to a lot of different places, and nobody's really gotten back to me. So I guess I should do it in front of the city commission here. These kids said, "What kind of dogs are those?" And I said, "Oh, one's a poodle and one's a Irish Water Spaniel." And they're, "Oh, those are really expensive dogs. How much are they?" And I jokingly said, $1 million. And they said, "No, they don't cost $1 million. If they cost $1 million, you wouldn't live around here, and you live right over there. I know, I've seen you." And I was like, "No, I like this neighborhood." They're like, "No, like, people get shot here." And I was like, "No, those are just fireworks." And they're like, "No, they're not." And that really bothered me. And I don't know what to do with that feeling. I don't know how I can get involved in some way to try and help change those things. So if you guys have any advice, I would love to hear it. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else wanting to address the commission this evening? Seeing no one, we're at commissioners' comments. Commissioner Anderson, Commissioner Cooney, Commissioner Urban, Commissioner Cunningham.
You know I have to say a few words. So I just wanted to highlight the last time we went through this process, I believe that we selected arguably the greatest servant in the history of the Kalamazoo City Commission. No, but I look forward to this process, and I hope that the community, you know, takes it serious and really gets engaged. As mentioned before, this is an opportunity to kind of get either your feet wet or however you want to call it, but it does give you a little opportunity to kind of present and show how you would advocate, champion, and be in a space like this if you so choose to put in an application. So I want the community to take it serious, and I look forward to the process. I also wanted to highlight there was a lot of miscommunication, I feel, you know, in regards to the city staff and some of the work that they've been doing. So I know that there are a lot of things that you guys juggle, and you juggle it all on a continuous basis, but we have to always try to continue to get better in those spaces, and as they come along, try to be as, I hate to even use the term transparent as possible. But yes, I think we have a lot of work to do. Although tonight I wasn't satisfied with the vote, I think that one of the things that I always continue to tell individuals, please continue to engage, please continue to have conversation. The battle is not over. We have to continue to have these deep dialogues, these deep conversations, so our community can be better in the end.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. We are adjourned.